you know, we're doomed for failure.
Oh well, and sure enough, here's Canada, which I can, because I just sent her a message, and now she's like, "Hey, you're live now, Canada, with both. Yeah, there she hung up.
Okay.
Go figure.
So, well, that's the way Canada is. It's a little Canada's a kind of a flaky place, you know. It's
Yeah.
it's got its own problems, you know.
When I went up there, when I was crossing the border up into Canada, the Men at Work song came on that said, "I come from the land down under, where women glow and men plunder." And I thought, oh my God! Even though that's from Australia, it made sense that us Americans were the rough and tough plunderers, and so there was a bit of odd. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it's like a New Zealand Australian thing too. You could just, there's lots of ways you can play the parallels, and who's the menace and who's the pariah and who's the moron, who's the smart one, and you know what I mean. It's just but obviously Canada has its advantages, but it's a better place to visit than to live, I would argue.
I felt for a while that I was on, like, oh man, I'm on the Star Trek. I'm on Star Trek. I just upgraded countries. Is that kind of how I felt?
Yeah, I mean, but you imagine after a month on the Enterprise, you'd be like, this is so fucking lame. I mean, we don't even have, like, we can't go shopping for clothes or anything. We all have to wear this stupid pants that don't fit and shirts that look like they were made by blind old women. I mean, come on. I can't live like this.
Yeah. Oh well. Hey. Well, let's see what she has to say about all that. Oh. Okay. Now you're live again.
You're way too funny. I'm watching. I'm hating you like fully completely. I want to smash you like through every wall I can find. What are you doing?
Oh well, we're just.
Shut up about me. Shut up about Canada. But I like that you're running live and you had whatever. I just not be involved. This is ironic.
You got to tell Canada to grow a sense of humor too. That's another line you could use.
Because I've grown a penis so large.
They can grow trees and mosquitoes, but they can't grow a sense of humor.
Happiness is a surprise. How do I'm not going to try to blame you, but I like it. And Inmendham, I've kind of missed you. You took a step back. I kind of.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I didn't go anywhere, so I'm just saying I don't step forward. I don't step back. I'm completely. And nobody likes it, but yeah, I'm sort of neutral on the whole thing because everything's a disaster from my point of view. So everything's a bomb waiting to blow up, and so yeah, I walk around everything cautiously.
Yeah. It's like the seasons are changing, and the ice is just getting picking up. It's just not. I don't think I'm ready to walk across a lake.
Yeah, well, you think too much about things that don't matter. When somebody says something doesn't matter, then you have to take their word for it. If you're not going to take their word for it, then talk to somebody else. But I'm just saying, if somebody says it doesn't matter, Faye, don't worry about it, then you have to say, okay, it doesn't matter, and I shouldn't worry about it. But you do exactly the opposite. The more I say, it's all right, Faye, don't worry about it, the more you worry about it.
What do you worry about?
I worry about it because they say, well, we'll have your cancer results back by Friday. That's where my sister is, not me, but it's where my sister is, and I feel like so much tension for watching my sister wait on her test results. We're still waiting for Friday. So we have it all week.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of that stuff going around. I got no solution for it. It's life is,
Well, positive thinking can only go so far.
Well, I'm just saying that it doesn't really matter. I mean, there's no escaping. So I'm just saying it's all about, the old Indian kind of line. Just pick a good day to die. And just say this is the day. This is a good day, and do it right rather than play the game of saying I'll wait for it to fall on me. Okay, because it's gonna happen anyway. You just have to it's the head game, right? So everything's the head game. So you just have to say, well, what's the difference? 3 months, 10 months, 6 years? Look at my life for the last 6 years. I could sit there and say, what have I done in the last 6 years that was worth, if I was procrastinating, I'd say, well, shit, those just weren't worth anything. So what the fuck? I could throw them in the waste bin and it wouldn't matter.
You pick the day to die, though. You're still going on. I say you as long as you can.
Well, I'm just saying there's no winning. So I'm just saying you're just playing a game thinking you're going to get out of this thing like you're going to escape the boogeyman. No, the boogeyman's going to win the end. He's going to chew you up, like a little piece of gristly shit, and that's at the end of it. So it doesn't. I mean, you're just putting off the horror. I'm just saying, train wreck is coming. Okay, it comes this month, or it comes 3 years from now, or it comes 30 years from now. I'm just saying, train wreck's coming.
Yeah. But I'd rather have you and your sister live long and prosperous and then have the train wreck occur.
Well, I'm just saying, if I add it up, I'm saying I don't see any accomplishment in any of these baboons walking around the human fucking planet here. I don't see that any of the baboons are doing a damn thing that I would say, yes, let's put that off. That would be just horrible if we missed your charming company. No, fuck it. So sorry. I mean, I'm throwing myself in the same. I have this perception that I'm important somehow. But that's just an internal relative perception. It has nothing to do with any absolute truths. Just has to do with my little warped brain saying, Gary, you're just too special. You're just too special, Gary.
Well, I think you're right, though. I think that the internal center, the complete selfish, all arrows point to you. You are
the pile of shit, the bullshitter.
Well, no, I'm just saying, for me, like to say, hey, I'm the center, all-seeing moment of the universe, like that is most important. That becomes the selfish most important.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying it's the least important, in my opinion, from an intellectual perspective. I mean, from a selfish baboon perspective, yes, the needs win. From the intelligent perspective, context over thousands of years or millennia or millions of years of human evolution, of animal evolution, from that perspective, that's just a pile of crap.
Well, and mine requires kind of a solipsistic denial in terms of intellectual games. You can say, well, intellectually, I tell myself I'm important, but I know that I'm not. And I say, well, solipsistically, I'm the only thing that is important, so I'll tell myself that, and both.
Well, you said it backwards, but I don't, regardless. I mean, you want to just paraphrase what I'm saying, fine, but I'm just saying, the point is that the intelligence knows there's no context. And, the context isn't going to save you. The context is going to destroy your meaning. And it's only the solipsistic asshole. It's only the selfish little turdy kid who has to be important and show off and prove something and, gain his little ego points. He's the only little cunt who thinks it's a good idea.
Isn't that just style of living? However you live, like you're necessarily going to live different than every other organism on the planet, every other human.
Well, I'm just saying the truth isn't a style, though. So that's what I'm going to argue is the facts aren't style. So they don't have a style. It either is or it is not. It either is a fact or it is not a fact.
Well, the internal aspect of your personality is unique, and everybody has that uniqueness. And so if you're trying
to... every snowflake is unique. It's still a pain in the ass.
Right. Yeah, I'm just saying, that kind of, starts with good disagreement out of the gate. We needed that one. But yeah, we're not saying sort of the same thing. I just think that the value is there. That the value is in sensing how you are.
So I'll reach for like a Buddhist kind of analogy, but the real game is the head game. And the real game is acknowledging that there's no game. The game is all negative. The game is chasing imposed desires, not chosen desires. And it is freedom from that need machine that is the true nirvana.
Yeah, well, as long as we're going for difference here, then I'll say that in my game, there are aspects of desire that I wish to acquire. in my game.
Retraction immediately. Why is it your game? Like you're calling it my game. Like
well, no,
well, he's playing from his perspective. So he's just saying the game. He's got his soccer shoes on. He's going to play soccer, and he's going to say there's a game of soccer here. I can explain to him, no, it's a horse racetrack. Okay, Dospook, you can't play soccer on it. All right, you can pretend you're playing soccer, but there's no playing soccer here, okay? There's horses running around in a circle. There's no soccer, okay? You can pretend that's what you're doing, okay? But I'm going to call that retarded, okay? When a person runs out into the horse track and starts playing soccer, I'm going to call him a retard.
Well, you can't play the game, I'm going to go climb a major skyscraper unless you left your area because you live...
Irrelevant to any philosophy conversation. Sorry, not doing psychology. We're not doing Gary's psychology.
I'm just saying you can't go play King Kong up a skyscraper unless you lived in the environment that had that skyscraper.
It's irrelevant. It's
yes. Hang on. I'm trying to display my...
I can't have a 12-inch penis unless I have a 12-inch penis. Yeah, that's true. I can't do all the fun things that 12-inch penises get to do unless I have a 12-inch penis. But who cares? That's not the conversation.
Your penis and the building are both part of your environment and the game that you create relative to
No. I'm sorry. See, that's the whole point. The whole point of philosophy is to step beyond that subjective crapola and recognize that we aren't just objects of conditioning. We're objects of intellectual understanding. We're objects of knowledge gaining. You gain a knowledge of the theory of evolution. You do not get psychologically damaged by it or psychologically bludgeoned by it. No, you are enlightened by it. So I'm talking about enlightenment. I'm not talking about psychological, whatever, rabbit chasing.
How did you handle you psychologically handled the death and passing of your relatives. You subjectively dealt with this. You objectively dealt with this. You have a preference for the objective. I have a preference for the subjective.
It's not about preference. Again, that's just, in my opinion, that's, again, just more psychobabble. You want to turn everything into psychology and pretend there's no truth in the universe. Fine. I don't find that rational or reasonable perspective. So that's why we fundamentally disagree about everything. It's because you're saying psychology wins. I'm saying intelligence wins.
Well, that's an interesting layout. That's interesting that you would say that. I wouldn't say that I'm not excluding intelligence. But I mean, you have to. My point, though, is you have relatives in your game, in your world, that affect your game, that affect your world.
They affect my psychology. Yes, they affect how I feel. They don't necessarily affect how I think or how I understand. So I'm just saying, I can say I'm against eating meat, but that doesn't mean I would honestly say I hate the taste of chicken. Okay, I don't hate the taste of chicken. Okay, I don't hate ice cream. I hate cows being tortured to be making ice cream. So yes, I can have a duality between my psychology and its aspirations, its desires, its weaknesses, its incredible weaknesses of my psychology, and the fact that I have a much better brain. Okay, I mean, my body might actually squeeze a booby that's unconscious for a little bit or something. It might do something rude. Okay, but my intelligence knows what rude is. And it knows it can call me on it. It can prevent me from actually even doing it. But the point is it'll certainly call me on it. So when I'm an asshole, I can say, yes, I'm an asshole. I was an asshole. I was short-tempered and I was bigoted, or I was this, or I was that. You know, I was impatient. I lost my patience too quickly. I can find lots of reasons why I was an asshole.
Right. Well, but those are relative to an objective community, and yet you subjectively like the taste of chicken. That is a truth also. I subjectively like the taste of chicken. I objectively, relative to my community, am calling myself an asshole.
Again, I'm not going to play this relative to a community thing. I'm saying no, right? It's the truth, okay? I'm saying relative to my understanding of reality and the truth, not a community. Yeah. I'm not just a psychology. I'm an intelligence.
But your
intelligence knows that I evolved on planet Earth from dumb, stupid organisms. That's why I have all the body attributes I have. I mean, this is a fish's fin. Okay, that's the history of these 5 digits. You know,
Okay, well, I'm just going to intersect with this because I was just writing a story about coagulated spirit dust. Like all we are is coagulated spirit dust, right? The idea of evolution, like the Grand Canyon was a plasma arc between Mars and the Earth when we were in a nebula, and that's a physics fact that seems to be.
I'm sorry. Yeah, well, we don't agree on facts either, so we don't really have much to agree on because we have this preposterously divergent. I mean, just a chasm of information for which we have absolutely no coherent agreement.
Well, yeah, no, and I can fold against myself and ground into, hey, these are the facts. If I had to give an argument and help kids understand geology and the formation, I would reiterate exactly what it is you're saying, and I would lockstep right into that. As I get more sophisticated, I think that my knowledge and the claims that I have about truth are broken. They're split. They continue to splinter, and then the avenues and they point back to themselves like a candy cane to the point where they're not. It's not a claim that all I'm doing is truth chasing, and then the truth itself seems to split and migrate.
Right. So I'd say that the difference between us is that there's this foggy intercourse between your psychology and your philosophy, where they are welded into each other like the two sides of our brain or something. They have the callosum, that translates between them. And for me, I've had the surgery, and the two brains are separate organisms. There's the fucking dumb monkey, and there's the elegant intelligence seeking the perfection of perfect verbiage.
That's it. Now I was gonna skip Trace because part of the reason I got you onto the call, Gary, was because one of our combined in whom we're influencing spoke of characterizations, animalia that we were tied to, and I believe that your character is a lizard, a lizard brain. It is a lizard, and yet it's the name of my old pet monitor lizard, Ippy. And so in any respects, you and I, Gary, have had according to common viewers that we've had some sort of I guess because of our differences, because of our approach, I say, yeah, we've done a number on the psychologies and the mind and the attitudes and even aspirations.
Well, I would say we've done a number on each other. I mean, it's pretty clear that happens too. I mean, and some people get it worse than others. I mean, you pretty dramatically had a pretty dramatic period, and I didn't know. Okay, and so I wasn't making it any easier for you. I didn't know I wasn't making it any easier for you. But could I have changed who I am because I knew somebody was in trouble? But the fact that we influence people, it's for a lot of these people, what you think, it's like Son of Sam. You could imagine that maybe he tried to find somebody interesting to pretend he was talking to, but all he could find was his dogs, right? So, you could imagine that if there was a Gary around or a Dospook, maybe he would have talked to them in his own head and made up a whole story of connections and all that kind of crap. So I'm just saying, people who are in trouble, if it's not me or it's not you fucking their head, it'll be Betty Crocker. They'll start talking to cake boxes or something. So, I mean, there's no point in pretending that there's some safety net that's going to catch them and cuddle them and say, look, it's all okay. You don't have to be crazy, because there's no such resources. Okay. If we don't kill them, the crocodiles are going to eat them.
Well, and I'm not, I think my ethic is still like once you're here, kind of like, hey, the anti-natalist has no responsibility to kill themselves. Once they're here, it's their life, right? And so when it's their life, I say, well, then take perhaps the Spock ethic of live long and prosper. But just in your case, if I indulged it, I would say, well, then don't have kids, but for your own organism, long and prosper. And so,
right, but that wouldn't be a Spockian statement anyway, right? So we're talking about Star Trek, the show that couldn't make clothes properly, are doing philosophy. So obviously that Spockyism is bullshit, and I would say that the theme would be is live well and be productive. Or,
right.
okay, it would be something a lot more important than this prospering idea, whatever a prosper is. Okay, that's
up. The reason I bring that up is because of the other character that I was mentioning that took masochism to the brink, meaning to slicing and dicing of the self, such that basically to murder and chop away oneself is not to live well. I would think you would agree objectively to that idea as well.
Well, if it's a survival mechanism, though, in the sense that the little hacks prevent you from doing the big hack. Okay, I mean, Coughlin had this problem. He's a bit of a masochist, and and it's all because of this psychological inferiority and self-deprecating perspective. And so there's nothing he hates pieces of himself, and so this masochism is a relief because he's exercising himself of demons. So you could argue that these little cuts, release some demons and takes the demon pressure off the person. So I'm not saying it's a good thing at all. I'm just saying that, well, it's that or the straitjacket. Okay, so I'm just saying maybe that's better than the straitjacket.
That and straitjacket in certain cases, and the scars themselves as a residual demon in a way,
Well, I know, but the scars are all part of the psychology, so I don't want to get too deep into it. But part of leaving a mark is just for that very purpose. They'll cherish the scars because those are battle wounds.
Well, in one way, they're battle wounds, and what I was going to say is my maiming of my physiology now has me looking, moving like a broken deer, like a broken animal, objectively within the community, such that my health compared to a healthy kid of me, so to speak, without the injury, I look maimed, I look debilitated, I look like the lame deer in the crowd. So there's a degree of unhealth that stems. It's not just a battle scar, like, hey, I'm really proud.
That is such a common human dilemma. I mean, everybody who's obese, you could argue, is in that dilemma where they've fallen into a trap they can't get themselves out of it because they've gone steep enough where it's so much work to climb out that there's no pleasure in life. That it's too burdensome to undo the deficit. And yeah, we all carry those deficits, right? You could argue that every person that has a venereal disease or something that's not curable, you know what I mean, that they're carrying this disability and this impairment to the rest of their life.
Yeah, you can argue that as time goes on, but then what do you mean by well if you're not saying, like, to you it's almost like at any point these are going to happen, so the sooner is as good as later. And my point is, no, the later is better than getting.
Well, it depends on what you gain from them, I suppose, in terms of, I would argue that some of these battle scars, or whatever you want to call them, create so much enlightenment or enhancement of who you become. I would say that even to be a truly, to love passionately, I would argue that you almost have to know the pain of loss and of loneliness. You have to walk some lonely, hard miles to really appreciate what you have, just as it is with a meal or anything else. If you allow yourself to become quite deprivated, the meal takes on a whole new dimension. And I think it's like that with most things in life. So sometimes our disabilities, there's, another great Indian line from Chief George, from the movie Outlaw Josie Wales. He thanked the forces or whatever for his blindness because it made him see, those kind of arguments that, you know, what really the best parts of us sometimes are our wounds, because the wound, you know, gave us vision that we were assholes and we became less of an asshole. I would say that kind of thing. You know, we were made more charming by the fact that we didn't have it all handed to us.
I agree with I agree with that. Meaning yeah, going to hell to get to this proverbial whatever heaven, or to enlightenment through suffering, long
Well,
suffering.
yeah, and you won't really be able to appreciate the heaven unless you've been to hell, you know, and you'll take advantage of it. You'll rape it and treat it poorly, you know, if you don't have that humility of knowing how hard the miles can be.
What do you think about people that are well groomed in life to lead, like their parents have well groomed them for so that they're dodging some of the dilemmas, and they seem to roll out maybe a little bit sweeter. They don't appreciate it because they don't have the negatives. Like they're going to obtain the negatives in life, but somehow they've gone, you know, they're
Well, I don't find too many admirable characters in the world, and certainly not among the intellectuals or the elite. So I would say they're the biggest slobs. See, I mean, Homer Simpson, yeah, he's Homer Simpson, right? I mean, he just didn't get there. He just didn't have any appreciation for a little bit of knowledge or reading a book or any of that kind of crap. And the people who have been educated and can recite Nietzsche and Kant and do all that kind of crap, but they have absolutely no character, because they haven't had to live a life without a net. You know, they haven't had to, you know what I mean? You don't know what it is to be on a tightrope till you're on a tightrope and there's no net, right? I mean, walking a tightrope with a net, like a Trump or something, and walking the tightrope without one, two different things, right? It's the same thing, but entirely different. And so that's what I say to that. There's no way to groom a person for life except to throw them, to dip them every day a little bit in the blender. I mean, you know, that's why I wouldn't raise a kid, because, you know, that's why even as a kid, I knew I wouldn't want to have a kid, because I knew there was these decisions I had to make about when do I let the kid cut the grass?
Well, see,
when do I let the kid risk ripping his arms off or dying or falling off a cliff? Or when do I expose him to reality? And how do I let him get exposed to reality without getting, like like you're pointing out, without the damage being too severe and excessive to the purpose of knowledge? I want him to learn, but I don't want him to be damaged by the process. And that's so hard to do.
the lawn on the top of Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner Plateau where he could fall off, and you treat, you don't let the kid get under the, I mean, that's what I meant by like a proper, like you can't, I don't know. It's like there's an education that's involved in listening to how it is that you wouldn't a child.
Well, I'm just saying, you've got these 50-50 odds. You give the child the freedom to make mistakes, and they'll end up like one of my sister's boyfriends, drunk driving, and he'll, his face in a tree. So I'm just saying that, that it is so difficult and so dangerous. I don't know how people aren't hysterically psychotic over this process of being responsible for the destiny of these little creatures, because there is just no way to plan and force and make it turn out the way it's supposed to. Deserve has nothing to do with it, to quote Clint Eastwood, and that's really bad. That's not a good thing. That's a really bad fucking thing.
That's fine. I was just saying that hearing what you say educates me on how it is, and to take even greater responsibility if I were to raise a child, even if I were to take another child and not of my own and raise the child, meaning to be responsible, to attempt to be responsible. Hey, don't let it stick a fork in the outlet. Put something in there. Don't let it mow the lawn before it knows.
I know, but as we both know, growing up in a generation where you weren't protected very often, that was part of the learning experience. So again, to create all the protections is to deny a true understanding of what life is.
Mhm.
So I'm just saying, to me, it's a dilemma as real as, particle wave duality or something. It's just something that's just so fucked up that you can't play the game. I mean, you either justify all the pain and say it's worth it, or you say none of it's worth it. But I mean, there's just no way to have some wishy-washy middle.
I know I'm in the wishy-washy middle myself, but I mean that. I think that you're right. Like we were, I didn't have helmets, didn't have seatbelts, or in the back of a pickup. But then, trying to think of what safety measures other cultures of different times had, and then it makes me wonder: do you think the water table of safety all around, like today, there were 2 Amber Alerts locally in my area. That's like communal wide, quick send out to all cell phones in the area. It's almost this more like everybody working together or responding together, like humanity locking together.
A black man drove into Utah. That's probably what the Amber Alert was. Well, I know a black man's visiting Utah.
Oh, well, no. Yeah, my roommate's a black man. One of my roommates, but
well, I know. Well, I'm just saying. I'm just making an example of how what people play the game of their alerts and their rescue squad and we're the heroes and all that other bullshit. That's a whole different kind of psychology going on. That's another game being played by people. This hysterical bullshit. It's just like the game with the 9/11 thing, right? All the family members of the 9/11 victims get $1 billion. And on the very same day, 10,000 people were killed by drunk drivers and they got nothing. Zero. I mean, just the same tragedy, same disgusting. My father's head just got blown off and ripped off. Those families, fuck them, fuck you, fuck you. Okay, these are the important people. Okay, they died in a fancy, fun way. You died in a boring way, a routine way. You're a piece of shit. So I'm just saying, I don't give a fuck about Amber Alerts, Smamber Alerts. Fuck all the fuck communities. Fuck the whole psychology of fucking communities. There's not a community on this fucking planet that I wouldn't take a fucking huge steaming shit on.
Well, I'm just saying the foam on your ceiling wasn't invented probably until, or the paint or some style until like that's very late technology in humanity, and yet that itself may be insulating you at a greater degree, and everybody gets it.
Right. No, but the point I really wanted to make to you was
hang on. Let me just have a few words. Let me just exhale a sentence or two here, right?
Okay.
That when I'm talking about Amber Alerts, I'm not talking about the alert itself. I'm not talking about the problems that are happening, but I am trying to say that as a whole, even protectionism, this safety model, the put helmets on your kids, wear safety belts, have Amber Alerts, like pad more sharp edges in your universe, right, and connect people. Is that not a type of human water table that is being risen that is perhaps helping the well-being of people for a longer period?
I think it's psychotic. I think it's truth or psychotic. So I think it's based on irrational notions, secondhand smoke, for example. Any genetically modified food is poisonous. I mean, 10,000 people, as many as 10,000 people a year could be stopped from dying from eating stupid raw seafood if they irradiated it. It's a completely legitimate process. It doesn't damage anybody. It can't hurt anybody if they know anything about it. And yet their hysteria, their nonsensical absence of proper priorities, which I tried to get to with the fucking 9/11 example, that there is no principles. The community isn't worried about the principles or the idea of real safety. It's all their little truther psychology, their quantum mechanics that they're shoving up everybody's ass. It's their stupid own little personal theories on what's important.
What and then that doesn't that cycle back to the idea of the truth then, because it's their truth that this group, this military, we should have saved these people in the towers and therefore we owed to them more, and their dying is somehow more important as a national owing to our mistake for not protecting them or allowing them, that kind of.
Again, the real point I wanted to make was I could go back to my own childhood, and I'd say that it was very rewarding for me to be able to use a hammer and smash my fingers. Now, I wasn't going to die from it, and I'm not likely to lose my hand or a limb. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't like this was there's a difference between something that's really threatening and something that's not. And even light sockets, for an example. I mean, I wouldn't leave like a 2-year-old. I'm going to go to the store. I'm going to leave the 2-year-old in the house to go play with light sockets, because you could burn the house down. But he's not likely to get truly electrocuted. Okay. So, I mean, and as a kid, that was one of my, that was, those the little things in life where you learn some lessons and you figure out the world a little bit. Electricity was I was so incredibly curious. So I was getting electrocuted all the time because I found this an incredible thing that you could just stick a bobby pin in this thing in the wall and this force would fly out of it and go, completely blow you up in a sense mentally.
Corpus callosum was that shock.
Well, I'm just saying that, so again, drawing these lines of what we should be in terms of, this idea that we can create a human being who we don't have to brutalize to know what life is or to know what love is. I'm saying that's a fallacy. If you create such a human being that has no knowledge of torture and pain and suffering and brutality, he will have no capacity to live a decent life.
A decent life. Interesting you throw that adjective in, as if it would be required. The one thing you don't like is the brutalization, yet the brutalization is required for a decent life.
I'm just saying the hunger is necessary for the life to have, that passion ingredient, which is the only psychological component, okay, that I cannot deny. I cannot deny the strength of passion. I deny its legitimacy. I don't deny its strength. And I don't deny the fact that it is what makes your art beautiful. It is everything that means something about this existence. But I'm arguing that the price for it is way too high.
I was just wondering what it would mean for it to be legitimate to you. You allowed your thought to say, okay, it's legitimate, then therefore,
like I said, then I have to make the kid having cancer be legitimate. I'll never be able to make a single one of the worst victims worth any of it. So you could take 7 million little pretty people in little pretty clothes and fancy suits and having charming dinners and clinking their glasses and all that shit, and all I need is one kid in the cancer ward to say, there's no way this works. Put the one kid on the scale. Fuck this game. Stupid game. Can't play it.
I know that's sad. And and everybody, like you said, all of those people clinking glasses will one day be that kid.
We're all going to get slaughtered, and we all get slaughtered to our lives, and we all wear these battle scars like battle scars. We're all proud of them. Yeah, I survived 4 cancers, and I had my eye removed, and I had, I got a peg leg, and I have rheumatoid arthritis, and and it's like, well, come on, this really, this is something. This is supposed to make me feel like there's some purpose here, that I can somehow beat you. I'm going to beat you in the disability contest. Yeah, I'll have both my eyes removed.
Right. The people clinking glass, like I was trying to give someone a synopsis of you a while back, meaning or the synopsis of the antinatalism, and from beginning of life to end of life, and the suffering in between, such that they said, well, like I said, for the most part, it requires the beginning and the end. The arguments resting on the first claim of imposition, and then the agony into death. And I said in the opposite, the people that say, oh, antinatalism is counterintuitive to the organism, reproductive, yada yada. And I said,
yeah. See, that argument's important though. So don't dismiss that secondary argument. I'll let you finish. I'll let you finish.
Let me make
okay.
Let me make trying to say, I was just explaining to them that embellishment of, instead of focusing on the beginning and the end, because you don't know where you were until after you started and your end isn't there. I said the majority of people are groomed and conditioned, and the organism is groomed, so to speak, logically, maybe even evolutionarily, embellish the time between as something that should be worked through, gratiated through, prospered, lived well through. And it's not to speak of all of these things of the negative, the helmets and the safety. It's to look at that course with all of its damages as sort of a remnant of virtue. And it's not a virtue itself, but the along with it, like the life with all of its agony included and all of its beauty included, all of everything is the whole spectrum of one's life that you and I will live, that all organisms that live. They're still living between their birth and their death. So there is a story there. There is a something there that is not just the beginning and not just the end.
Yeah, well, you're saying, though, it has some necessity that involves this procreative act, and I'm saying that's not only can I argue that the act is a malicious fascist imposition, I can argue that it's a trivial psychological indulgence that doesn't have any historical precedent. There's nothing in evolution. Evolution makes you horny to have sex. Animals don't think, I'm making babies every time they're humping. Okay, and we didn't do that for most of human history. We didn't fuck each other saying, I'm making a baby, I'm making a baby. No, we weren't thinking of that at all. Okay, that's just horseshit to think there's any native function that says, I will make babies. Okay, I never felt any such silly thing. All I ever felt at any moment in terms of an encouragement to go there was this idea of making a copy of myself. And once I found out a few facts about how, well, the copy is going to be a shitty copy because it's going to be half her genes, and her genes are going to fuck the thing up, and it's going to be stupid and an asshole. So fuck it. There's no point anyway. Well, let me just finish. So the argument isn't just that it's a malicious fascist imposition of risk. The argument is that it's a trivial, jackass, dumbass ambition. Okay, this whole purpose of I must reproduce myself. I don't need to care for children because if it's somebody else's kids, I couldn't give a fuck. I'll watch them die homeless on the goddamn street. Okay, it's not about taking care of kids. It's just about me satisfying my ego ambition to create copies of myself.
We know. Okay, we do it between amongst the three of us and probably the viewers that I'll get. We have a rundown of your position. I was just what I historically and otherwise. So and it's fine that you mention it, but what I was going to interject was, like, you have orgasms, you take shits, you wipe your eye out when stuff lands in it, and and so even assuming, like, okay, we have sex, we want to fuck, the idea that the experience, if you will, like the uterus is not a vestigial organ. The opening process of a woman is an exercise of her femininity. That your argument in one way resides heavier on the male end than it might on the female end, meaning that the man's orgasm is great. Oh, I got off and I'm run away. And the man does not have a bodily growth and an expansion and a birth, where the woman's history, her actual physiology, has a evolutionary history of passing this process, this mode of let this organ function and let this occurrence happen. I mean, I think there's a definite difference between your argument as it applies to men and your argument as it applies to women relative to aspects of their physiology. And I'm not speaking about the intellectual nature of it. I'm just saying.
I would argue there's no room for that in evolutionary psychology, if you want to call it that. But in the evidence of evolution, there's no evidence of those kinds of correlations, because evolution doesn't care as long as it creates the end product. And the end product is ignorance allows there to be the creation of children, not knowledge. So I could just as easily argue to you if especially some women have a really hard time with pregnancy, vomiting all the time, all kinds of, really nasty. if I could show them the movie of their pregnancy before they get pregnant, that I might be able to demonstrate to them that maybe they don't want to get pregnant. So if they didn't, if they weren't acting on some false optimism that everything's going to be all right, and it's not all right, and your kid's born with a cleft lip or some other problem, you know, that psychology has nothing to do with evolution. That just has to do with people being pig-headed and risk almost risk unconscious. And they don't pay any attention to the real liabilities of their behavior. They just pretend, I'm not that drunk, I can drive. I'm not that drunk.
How could it not be a process of evolution, meaning it keeps occurring?
Yeah, you know, it occurs by a trick. It occurs by a trick. If the salmon knew it was sentencing its kid to swim up a stream and die, it wouldn't do it. Okay, I'm just saying, if they knew what it meant, what was going to happen, if the lion knows that 9 out of 10 of its fucking cubs are going to get killed horribly, it wouldn't fucking do it.
Wait, you're saying that the average 14-year-old girl does not know what it's like to see insects die or have relatives die. Like, she might not have the intellectual capacity, but it probably has a concept of death. Meaning, and yet it still occurs mentally to her to allow.
It doesn't matter. I mean, look, seahorses exchange the burden, okay? I mean, the female fertilizes the eggs in her, but she dumps them into the male, all right? The role is a role, okay? The fact that the woman has a uterus, okay, and that she behaves differently and that she has different mechanical programming to be capable of basically enjoying suckling children and you know, the whole, all the burdens that go with dragging these little monstrous parasites around with you all day. Yes, they have a different psychology than males. I'm not saying they don't have a different psychology. I'm just saying there's nothing first sacred about fucking evolution. There's nothing fucking sacred about, you know, the cannibalism of fucking reproduction. Let's just create more fucking victims to throw off the lifeboat. Yeah, let's just, you know, we're on a lifeboat, but yeah, let's keep knocking the bitches up so we can throw the babies to the sharks. I mean, I'm just saying the psychology is moronic. The idea that evolution is God is nonsense. Evolution is a child molesting bastard. It kills and mass murders children. Okay, that's what evolution does. More kids die than anything else. Okay, more things die as immature organisms, way more than as old men. Okay, nature hates kids with a passion and sticks knives in their fucking heads for fun.
Oh, well, all I was suggesting, because then you went back to the feminine. All I was trying to do is say meaning that the naivety of young adults having sex and having offspring is not an oversight of what the concept of death is. It's not an oversight of them not knowing that their great-grandparents don't exist because they're dead, or seeing what dead is on their kitchen table often, right?
I just completely disagree. It is completely made out of a type of ignorance. My parents have admitted it, okay? If they knew they were going to watch their daughter die horribly, they wouldn't have done it. So they've already admitted, yes, if they had thought about it and really considered it, yes, it was incredibly risky. It was an incredibly dangerous project. It was way over their competence level. They had no experience. They had no knowledge of how to do any of this shit.
You talked about your psychology and their psychology. Now you're back to psychologies again.
No, I'm back to information and knowledge. I'm saying if they knew, if they had considered, if they had been informed, if somebody like me had spent the time to say, hey, did you really think about having kids? Did you really think about what the fuck you're going to do if the damn thing's born autistic and how your whole fucking life is going to have to change? Did you really think about any of that shit before you had the fucking kid?
Well, okay, so this is what I meant by this seems to still be the mindset to have kids is still seems as if it's evolutionary in that people in their prime of naivety where they haven't had enough life experience their consideration, their ability to consider is narrowed because of evolution.
No, that's like saying religion is evolutionary or something. Religion is just a liability of the fact that it's easier to live in a world that's simple, stupid, and gives you dumbass instructions than one where you actually have to become informed and you have to have knowledge. And, okay, it's a lot easier to drive a car if you don't have to know how the engine works, and you don't have to know how the battery works, and you don't have to know how anything works. Yes, it's a lot easier. And so, yes, human beings take the easy, selfish road instead of the hard road of understanding what the fuck they're actually caught up in.
My argument is that the nativity of it matches like their age, right? Their age for prime birthing is out into this nativity. That's an evolutionary fact.
It's not an evolutionary fact. It's a fact of physics. Okay. Yes, you start off dumb and you acquire knowledge with time. You start off physically strong and you slowly die. Yes, those two correlate with each other, and they correlate for an evolutionary reason, in the sense that, okay, the only way you can have reproducing machines is you have to kill the old machines. Okay, if you let the old machines live forever, then everything gets overpopulated and nothing can exist except the Xerox machines. So obviously you have to kill the Xerox machines. So yes, the two acts are intimately tied together. The destruction of the old model in some sort of callous, brutal way of slow destruction is intimately tied to this stupid act of make another victim.
Now, and my argument is that the coinciding of nativity with the birth cycle is that they're naively in. You know, they're unable to live an extended life, so their consideration of the death process is much more limited, which makes them at that point prime to have offspring, meaning it's an evolutionary cycle to be naive.
It is not. It has nothing to do with evolutionary cycle. It just has to do with the fact that you want it to be able to reproduce as soon as possible. So as soon as it's in a condition where it can take the responsibility of taking care of a kid, actually being able to hold it or pick it up and fend for it. Yes, that has kids. That's all. Evolution's just saying, yes, make the copy as soon as possible, and then I can kill the old copy as soon as possible. That's why rats live 3 fucking years. Is because evolution is saying, yes, the monster doesn't need to live long. It just needs to make lots of babies.
If we bred a lot faster, you're saying the old would die earlier by that logic.
Yes, that's what evolution does to every organism that actually breeds a lot. They die quickly because that's what has to happen.
No, there's plenty of 100-year-old turtles, and there's thousands of them.
Right, and how many babies does it kill? So that's my whole point. Nature's a child molesting murderer. It kills 10,000 baby turtles for that one adult turtle. 10,000 babies die. 10,000. 10,000.
The deaths aren't occurring at a younger years. For the turtles are still living to
I can't believe this argument. No, they're not living. 10,000 of them die in immaturity, so one gets to live long. So one lives long. 10,000 die in immaturity. 10,000.
I'm making a population argument. Because you basically said
I'm making the anti-nature argument. I'm saying I'm not going to revert to nature and say it's a good system that needs to be obeyed. It's obviously a child-killing machine. Why would I obey it? I would protest it. I do not sit there and do what the fucking child molester wants me to do. No, I do exactly the opposite of what the child molester wants me to do.
Back to truth. Back to truth. The idea that the way in which you're seeing the case, the way you parse it, the way you approach it is different than the way other people must and can and do parse what they call the truth and approach it. Like, I think that
there's no truth parsing by the replicators. The replicators on planet Earth, and especially in this generation, are parsing no fucking truth. They're all ignoramuses. They're the dumbest fucking humans are having all the kids. All the smart people don't have kids. That's a proven fact. The smarter you are, the less kids you have. Okay, the more cultured you are, the less kids you have. The more education you have, the less kids you have. It's all about being complete dumbasses and making a dumbass decision.
That there's an argument there, but I don't believe that's a complete and concrete absolute truth of the case, meaning that rests on the idea of IQ arguments based on whatever you're going to base your IQ arguments on.
Well, I don't care about IQ. I'm just saying measure it by any kind of production standard of being a functional human. I'm just saying by any functional human standard of having intelligence of some kind. I mean, knowledge of how to grow crops or knowledge of anything. The more knowledge somebody has, the less likely they are to have kids, and the less likely they certainly are to have 5 or 10 of them. So it's only the dumbest of dumb bitches that have 10 kids.
Well, and then so it's back to the gender. So now the women, the bitches.
Well, I'm just saying they have to be held the most responsible because yes, they're the ones that have the blades. Okay, they're the Terminator that has to worry about crushing things with its G.I. Joe grip. They got the uterus that grows these monsters, and that's like I said, if I had one, I'd make sure it was well plugged.
Right. Well, okay. So anyway, okay. With all of this being said, if we can jump topic a tad, because and I think this is kind of a good intro to even how we're working with each other here in the discussion. But so the reason I got you here for this discussion was the idea of, and I mean, you might want to kind of wipe it away with a very quick brush as you have already addressed it, but in my consideration of things, like the mitigating suffering and marginalizing suffering is one thing. As far as psychological effects, I don't think the conditioning of Martha Stewart in a kitchen, cookbook cocking, showing people how to cook and decorate daintily their kitchen is going to have the same sort of psychological, dramatic, push-pull, angular direction that your being and my being, our two personalities, have this yank pull, like we're more of a taffy stretcher than a dough bread riser, if you will, right? Like hey, look, we want, like a lot of people treat their kids and their families and young adults, they're still in formation, they're still formulating life, right? In a lot of ways. And so my opinion is that amongst the internet, there are some very volatile personalities, and that you and I have been clumped by a certain community, mostly it seems of men, young men, that are affected by your take, my take, and I say, oh, my spiritual ghostwriting masochism, and your fuck life, go kill yourself.
That's not my philosophy. So again, that paraphrase is bullshit anyway. My philosophy emphasizes the fact that you have a mission here. You have the power to affect things. You have an obligation to be a fixer, to go out and try to prevent the harm. Prevention is the biggest, greatest goal. Okay, cure is nice and band-aids are swell, but prevention is the game. Okay, that's where the maximum value is achieved, is in preventing the unnecessary harm. And there's a ton of it that's going on. And so I never advocate that people bail out and commit suicide. I never say, oh, you need to save yourself. You don't have any responsibilities here on the lifeboat anymore. If you just kill yourself, everything here on the lifeboat will somehow get all better and it'll be all fixed. No, it won't be. The babies won't stop coming. The disabilities won't stop being made. The cancer won't stop. None of the horrors on this fucking planet will stop if you bail the fuck out. So where have I made videos or made arguments about people killing themselves? So the whole idea that you think this subject has something to do with killing yourself is just such bullshit.
Right. Well, now, what I was going to say is it's not about the content of your argument. It's about the read of the expression, right? Meaning your personality, my regardless of if anyone can even follow the content of the argument, the aspects of
Okay,
what was
right. So now I'm
there's
responsible
volatility.
for because I'm saying it in English and they're fucking interpreting into Japanese and they can't figure out what I'm saying, that somehow I'm responsible because when I say go out in the world and fix things, they heard go fucking jump in front of a car. Well, I can't fix that, okay? Fuck that. I'm not going to waste my time trying to fucking say my words so anybody in any language can understand them. No, if you're going to fuck with what I say and misinterpret it, fuck you. That's your bad, asshole. I didn't say that. I didn't say, I'm saying right to the camera. I didn't say kill yourself, shithead. All right.
No.
I didn't say smoke cigarettes, shithead. I didn't say go drink some booze, shithead. I didn't say go take drugs, jackass. I didn't say any of that fucking shit.
Hang on. And what I'm saying, oh, right, and I know you didn't say that. What I'm saying is that, like, okay, so for example, it might be something like if somebody attacks you and says something and you don't like it, you'll say, I wish you'll suffer as badly as these fuckers that you're harming, and da-da-da, right? It's almost a casting, and so even just a split phrase, I'm not asking you ever to change who you are. You're doing you. Gary does Gary. They're doing them. I'm doing me. We're doing ourselves.
Well, no, I don't mind critiques about the fact that I can be reckless in my verbiage and that there can be dangerous to say things in certain ways. And I certainly, as you've just pointed out in this conversation, I can say things that are very for a feminist, I can be a pretty obnoxious chauvinist. But the point is that I always fix it. I think I always come back to the center and explain why it's important not to be a chauvinist, why it's important not to not value women and their passions and their desires and all that shit, and the fact that they're a living thing and they're trying to find happiness too and all that bullshit. So I do attempt to fix, and I'm not saying you can't be critical that my persona might be attractive to people who are trying to cling to something that looks like it's going to fight against the demons. And some of the demons might be their demons. And so he's a demon fighter. And so, he's going to jump on the cause, but he's not going to really understand the cause. And he's just going to understand that I hate things and that I'm obnoxious and I'm angry. And he's going to feed off the anger. He's going to feed off the emotion. And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. And I'm not saying I don't have some responsibility when I use it recklessly, but I'm just saying I can't fix everything. I'm going to unify physics and I'll do a few other things, but I don't know if I can do everything on this planet. I don't know if I can fix everything for every individual.
Of course not. Of course not. I would. No one would expect it. And the reason I brought you here was to speak on the topic. It wasn't to have you change anything. It just have to get your thoughts, and for us to in unison, like, speak on it as a theme together because of, like I said,
well, I think we both could agree on one thing, right? We both want to have a productive influence on people in what we're doing. There'd be no point in doing it without that being the product of the expressions, the conversations, even the personal, even the stuff that is just almost self-flagellation or whatever you want to call it, the part we do for our own psychological benefit, in terms of getting a grip on our own life and purpose and function and use and value and all that shit. So we could agree on our mission statement both being directed in some sort of idea of not being harmful. I mean, I don't think you're trying to hurt anybody. And I obviously don't think I'm trying to hurt anybody. And really the conversation is just about, how careful do we have to be? So we're back to talking about whether we should put a plastic plug at the light socket or not. Will little Gary be benefited by playing with electricity, or shall I prevent him from gaining the knowledge of what it's like to be electrocuted? Tough question.
Because you said, on the outset, like, we disagree about everything, meaning as far as the narrowing down of the topics, I'd say, yeah, in this domain, yeah, we have a huge disagreement of approach. And I just think of people seeing it like two swords pairing, or two energies, or two spectrums that are going off. And then when they absorb, It's just many personalities, but for one particular reason, I'm not certain why, our two personalities have this weird grouping of people that seemingly have an attachment. I would say you more in a tangential state, meaning I think a lot of people they wouldn't mind engaging with you, but they keep you at a distance because they don't know how to handle it. And on the opposite end, I think I get a lot of engagement, and yet I am left in this kind of juxtaposition of direction away from your personality, and we're grouped together in their minds, in their modes, in their, maybe it's just their habits. They enjoy seeing us two be as weirdly somewhat eccentric, rare personalities, and so they glom onto it. And maybe it's just by habit.
See, this is the catch, because if I could do it my ideal way, it would be like in some sci-fi movie. It would be like the sterile room, no features, and everybody in the white coats or something with the white hats, and it's just let us find the perfect verbiage to express the explicit truth about something. It's almost like mathematics. It's like my real passion is to have this perfectly intellectually ordering of reality. Let's go from the first little organism all the way through all of the bullshit of what made us, and what we actually do feel, and what we actually do think, and why we think it, and what programmed us, and what blah blah blah. And I am looking for that explicit, sterile, completely unpassionate, completely, unpersonality, mathematical existence. I hunger, as much as I don't look like I hunger for that, with my peeling ceilings and my, the chaos of the disorder of my own appearance, and my the way I function, the way it's, the passion of it. Right. I hunger for that impassionate, perfect, scratching the little digits out and doing getting the right answer, the very right answer in very precise methods, just following the exact order of connecting the dots, no mistakes, doing it all in ink, no erasing.
Well, I am fascinated by blockchain races and the whole crypto sphere, not just in the capitalistic, and all the negatives that you could cast about it, but in the trusted nature of decentralized ledgers that are trying to exact code every movement, not to find truth at first is to index it, to file it, to.
Well, I wish that was its purpose. Okay, to tell you the truth, I really, I think it's obviously I'm all for electronic currencies, but the ones that exist are all have this gimmick of making them all don't act like a real currency has to, which is you don't want it to be something people hold on to. You don't want it to be something that gets more valuable, because then it's not a currency anymore. That then you've turned into something the hoarders will collect because it'll be more valuable tomorrow. So if you make a cryptocurrency that gets more valuable, it's doing exactly the opposite of what a practical currency has to be, which is you have to encourage people to spend it. Hoarding cash creates inflation. Okay. Inflation creates consumption and production. So you need inflation to force people to spend their resources.
Yeah, I think attention to the whole Metcalfe's law, the more one attends to a network or attends to any X variable, the more people that attend to it, the higher the value goes up. It almost squares at the more people that attend to it. So it's not so much just holding it.
So this is really about analysis.
My point was to lay on your math thing, though, right? Because you said you have this precision-oriented attempt at truth, and I said, and I, immediately I was thinking of the difference between Spock and Data, how Data wanted to be human and Spock was trying to get more to the exactitude of the mathematical mind, the logical mind, the frame of the world as it was, in the acquisition and the attempt towards moving towards a purity of truth. And I do think there's a huge problem with truth quests and believing that the models actually do, that models of mind and models of mathematics, although they're really wonderful, actually do have a real true
well,
reference.
let me give you an example. Let's say I create a virus or something. Okay, so I create a virus and release it into the world, and so now it's a problem. Okay, so the problem exists. My argument to you would be there is the shortest line, best solution to that problem. So I could argue malaria or something, right? Is the best solution to buy people a bunch of netting, or is the best solution to invest all the money in creating a cure? Something that actually kills the bug forever, kills malaria forever. So, so my argument is that in this argument, we're really just being troubleshooters, and we're saying, what's the most efficient way to fix this problem? So we're just playing Superman, kind of doing the, well, can I stop the elevator this way, or do I instead just put a hole in the wall and that'll make the elevator slow down, and then I can, you're trying to find the best, most efficient, straightest line that kills the fewest people, harms the fewest things, and gets you the desired solution, gets you to the solution. So that's what I'm arguing, is that whether we agree that straight line exists. I say it does. I say you have no argument that says there isn't a difference between the straightest line and all the other crooked lines. There is a straightest possible line, and my ambition is we should always strive to find the straight line.
But with the idea of malaria, is it netting? Is it killing malaria, or is it making the organism immune to malaria and letting it?
Exactly. We can't know the answer. I'm not saying we know the answer to that problem. What I'm saying is in the multiverse, right, in the world that we could imagine, of all permutations, there is the shortest line. There is the most efficient solution out there, and it is for us to try to discover that straight line. That's my argument.
I know, but let's say the straightest line is the netting. But let's say, let's say that the straightest line. Hang on. The straightest line. You're still alive, Faith. Hang on a sec. Let's say the straightest line is killing the malaria virus, like ending the virus. That would be the straightest line. But let's say that if we decided we were going to make the organisms immune to the malaria and still allow the malaria to continue in the ecosystem, that it would be better to choose that opinion, not the straight line, because perhaps there would be a benefit of its existence in some other means that is yet to be seen.
It tortures a bunch of other organisms that exist in the wild, so I would argue that can't be the right answer, because it's a menace to other organisms also. But regardless, I'm just saying it's a Tyrannosaurus, okay? It's not something you sit there and try to find a defense for. It's just a machine, a malicious, nasty machine. And it doesn't do anything productive or good. It just does destructive things.
Some it that way, right? But there's certain things negative, like there's retro.
Look, it's just one example, okay? I'm just the real argument is there a straight line or not? I'm saying there's the straightest line solution does exist.
I'm not arguing.
It's our obligation to find it.
Okay, it's fine to find it, but it's also our obligation to find curved roundabout lines and the collateral of what it means to implement a solution, just because it's the quickest, most great solution. Meaning
whatever. That's not the argument. My argument is it's not our obligation to look for a crooked line. Our obligation is to try to find the straightest line.
It is if you need to maintain something. You don't want to just solve a solution. Like you could remove all the plugs in your house. That's a direct solution to keeping kids from sticking forks into plugs. It's not practical. So then you find a secondary solution that mitigates that as an
look, we have to use analogies that have conditions on them, and the condition is that we're not going to talk about the fact that, well, whatever, we're going to make spaghetti, and that means we'll plant more wheat, and that means they'll plant less corn, and then that'll have an implication, and then I'll have an implication. We're not talking about something with 5 million different implications. We're talking about something simple. Let's just say cancer or something that I wouldn't think you have any notion that killing the cancer gene would somehow deprive the universe of some beautiful thing.
Well,
So,
what about transhumanism then? Like the idea of like two dead, you like the idea of like, okay, if there is a solution, like the problem is suffering and death. Okay, what happens if transhumanism we eradicated or prolonged it to we can't even fathom how long people.
Again, I've made that argument before in the sense that I don't think a quality life is going to be a fun life. So my argument is still going to be to you that if you let's say you were creating human beings that were going to be born at 20 years old, and you had to manufacture their psychology, would you really try to make a human being that didn't have hard and sad and nasty memories of experiences? No, you would have to put those in. You'd have to put that negative in, all right, to be able to create a quality human being.
No, and let me just argue and say you might, in a population, you might want to develop some of them that did not have that memory history.
They're just going to be Trumps. They're just going to be silly, stupid, ignorant fucks.
Who knows that? So how do you make that speculation?
Well, I'm saying it's not just speculation. You see it in life. Don't tell me you haven't seen this in life, that you haven't seen the preppy bullshitters, the fucking, Playboy man, and the frivolous fucking, whatever they call those debutantes, those debutante twits, who think the only thing that is important is how many pieces of dust did you get off the desk today. I mean, please don't tell me that these people are real humans, that these fucking monsters aren't anything worse than the goddamn garbage pickers in Africa. Of course, they're just as bad.
Created these people at the age of 20 that are living this way, and they didn't give them any negative experience. They never had a childhood negative experience, and they're examples of them. I think
I'm saying that the more privilege you give a person, the less character they're likely to have. That's been my life experience, and entirely my life experience. The easier their life is, the less you want to know them. The less you want to know them.
Right. Okay. Now, hang on. Because this was a fancy that I had, a novel idea that there was this idea of transhumanism that got boring because, like you said, there was no negatives and things were positive and smooth, but then people decided that they wanted to actually die as long as they could revert back to life after the fact, but they wanted to be pain-free in the process, so that was developed. But then later on, pain-free death and revitalization.
I don't see that as a problem, really. I'm just saying that I'm still going to argue that.
I'm finishing my story, Gary. Give me a minute.
No, but it doesn't.
Just give me a stage for a minute. Just let me exhale this idea, right? And so, at one point, they get bored with the idea of living a pain-free death and resurrection, so to speak, or reorganization or reskinning, that they decide to re-implement horrors of pain, such that it was a virtue then to die in agony to relive a positive transhumanistic life, way out into the future, right? And so there's my little promo. And
whatever. I think of that as just your description of masochism, but whatever. It is. It's not that I'm trying to cut you off. It's just that you lead into these subjects based on premises that I don't think are viable. I don't think the boredom thing would really be a problem. It's like saying I'm bored playing a video game. People can play video games for fucking ever. Okay, you don't have to add much variety for them to find it interesting. So I don't buy the argument that if I woke up every day, in my mansion next to Pebble Beach, I went out every day on a sunny day and played golf and fucked a few chicks after a good round, that I couldn't do that every day forever and be perfectly satisfied, because I think I could. Because you can always play a better round. You know what I mean? You can always, you can always do it better, right? You can always play the video game better.
Yeah, but you would eventually get bored of that video game, of playing that golf.
I just doubt it. I don't. You say so. You say I'd love to do the experiment, but I just don't think so.
You're not speaking objectively about other people. You're speculating about other people, and you're speaking about what you think your
I'm talking about my knowledge of human psychology, and I'm just saying, as long as you have a game that challenges somebody, every day will be a challenge. Okay, all we're going to do is change the chicks. You know, one day it'll be an Asian chick, the next day it's a blonde chick. We'll make it a little bit different, shaved pussy, not a shaved pussy. I'm just saying, I'm just saying, as a psychological fact, I just think you could find a person on Earth right now sitting in their mother's basement who's been playing the same video game for 20 years.
Right. I'm not saying they're not there. I'm just talking about the variance, right? As much as you want to state what would happen if we developed people at the age of 20 that had no history of negatives, and you make a speculation on all populations of people that do that would necessarily X, I say there would necessarily be an X1, an X2, a Y, and a Z. Right?
I'm just saying transhumanism is more anti-Buddhist philosophy, in the sense it's
a topic.
Well, it's a topic that I don't think gets to the fundamental subject, in my opinion. Right. And again, even just calling me an anti-natalist doesn't get to my real argument, which is it's in the nature of life. Again, my argument is against the child massacring that takes place in the very function of the natural organism. That in itself is the biggest horror. What's happening to humans on Earth is, yes, it's traumatic and it's interesting because we're humans, but frankly, most of the psychological pain taking place on planet Earth is not happening in the human brain.
Yeah, and I mean, if computer AI were to happen and implemented in all systems, maybe the computers that becoming sentient would go, I want this electricity out of me, and then they would just shut themselves down. It would be painful, or they would have to accept.
Well, I don't think it's that easy to create a sentient, but whatever, that's another argument to have. I don't think you just pop sentience into.
Yeah, I know. I'm just once again, I'm just throwing out because some of the people that we influence have mindsets that generate fictions, that run on analogies, they run on association, they run on artistic ideas, and these ideas, I think, need to be expanded. Not in my universe, and maybe that's where we're running roughshod. Is that I think you'll state what you think is the case, reduce it, make the arguments for it that embrace it and buttress that. And I'm like, we'll break out of it and then run over here into.
Well, let's just go another example. What's more psychotic? Okay, the David Cassidy guy died recently, right? And he spent 10 years having girls chase him down the street, ripping his clothes off and shit. Now, what is more psychotic? Okay, right? The guy who's cutting himself, or some mother who drives her daughter to go chase David Cassidy down the street. Now, what is more psychotic?
Good question. I think Kentucky Fried Movie, where the guy's chased down by all the women topless on skates to lead to his death. I agree with you. What is more psychotic? Well, it's more neurotic. It's more twisted in a way. It's more publicly twisted that the woman would take her daughter there, but it's more interpersonally bodily.
Well, I'm just saying. So should we say that? Well, we got to take American Idol off the air. We got to do this and do that because there's people. These psycho women will push their prodigy into being one of these trivial people. That they'll I'm just saying, what's the danger of everything that's in our culture? So right. In a sense, as much as we are dramatically anti-regular culture, I don't think we're more dangerous than that tripe. I mean, the tripe that regular culture is feeding people and doing to their psychology, the damage regular culture is doing is so much greater than any damage we could do, okay, in terms of the pain we might cause people accidentally. The pain regular culture is causing in terms of the stupid ambitions. I mean, the highest viewed videos on YouTube are makeup videos and shit. I mean, just, come on. I mean, that psychological damage is a lot worse than anything we're doing.
Well, I was just gonna say that if you went to hang out in a men's club or something in Moscow, they might have you jump into cold water and then come out and sit in a hot tub. That may be not only psychologically damaging but physiologically upsetting. Although they do it as a mode, a historic, a historic exercise.
Well, again, this isn't about just a historic exercise. It's about real damage. So, I mean, if the Russians said jump in a bucket of acid and melt off a layer of your skin or something, well, maybe this is a different scenario, right? That after 10 years of doing that, they look like they're 170 years old and they can't sit down anymore. Well, then there would be an argument. So we're talking about real damage that ruins people's lives. They waste their childhood, waste their instead of the daughter wanting to have some ambition and get a real career, she ends up just being a makeup twat.
Right. And I mean, I don't get me wrong. I know that YouTube and the modern culture on the internet and where people are attending their minds is crazy, but there's still, and I really had to fight with this because I go to a coffee shop a lot and it's finals week here, and there's a lot of young pre-med students and engineers and people, and I get into discussions about the mode of education, like being further away from the form of brick and mortar and walking from enclosure, sharing a room where other people are raising their hand, asking questions, and then more of it's becoming, and it's done through networks, and they still are, these forms, these historic cultural forms of education, but more and more of it is displaced into, there's a math teacher there from China and he grades his papers and then he sits there and he watches goofy Japanese videos and laughs his ass off. And I don't find the meaning, I don't know quite, makes my speculation about what the next generation is capable of. Actually, I imagine perhaps it's smarter, not dumber. Perhaps it's more attentive. I used to think maybe they didn't read as much, that they were short-minded because of Twitter, and maybe many of them are, but I thought maybe there's more concentration too that goes above and beyond our generation.
Yeah, well, it's just testing with distractions, right? And the availability of distractions. So that for every positive, in the sense that you can access, like where we couldn't, right? When we were kids, we couldn't access, you couldn't see a heart surgery performed, and you couldn't get access to how to, chemistry or this, or, you know what I mean? You had to get it from the school. You had to get it from the authority. And so that's a huge advantage. But in the other sense, there's this huge disadvantage in that the porn's right there, and all the, the chicks doing makeup videos. I could watch those all day when I was 13, right? What would I be doing when I was 13 years old on YouTube, right? What would I be doing right now? Would I be doing philosophy, or would I be watching the fucking Kabuki, fun time show? I mean, yeah, I'd be watching the chicks, and I'd be distracted as hell. So the only liability, we have all these choices, and that's the liability. It's the choices, right? I mean, there's so much, and you can indulge your, it's like you're giving an infinite wank ticket, and you're saying, cool, I can wank all day, and that if you have that ticket, you're in big trouble. I mean, I was on a medication once that gave me that ticket, and I took full advantage. Okay, I mean, yes, I can spend 5 hours jerking off. Yeah, why not?
Yeah. No, it's like the golf course scenario. Like, hey, you choose that all day, every day if you could. Eventually, though, I think people would say, "Oh, look at those other guys that are doing this. And I spent all my time jacking my monkey and getting drunk or whatever." Right? It's like,
well, I guess part of the game is that you don't have those distractions, right? The more perfect what you're eating is if you don't know anything else exists. So yeah, if you're not comparing the gruel you're eating to pumpkin pie or whatever, then a la mode, then yes, it's going to make it a lot more challenging to eat your gruel. But if you're comparing your gruel to a bowl of rocks, you're saying, hey, this is a lot better than eating rocks.
Well, yeah, right. Well, I don't know. I don't know what to make of it, but immediately when I think of the topics about the next generation, because I've been trying to consider it, but only, like you said, to figure out straight line solutions, or what our effect may be on a generation that is like kids now are groomed to be moved into computer atmospheres, right? Like there's classes on you must post this blog with these attributes of your classes, like these things that are making their engagement with the internet not only mandatory, but then how their form fit in culture, some of them disparate, some of them wild, some of them out of whack, some of them in different states and different countries and different whole, I mean, everybody comes from a different province and a different region. So it just makes me wonder, what is it about what it is our generation is doing online that is skewing, warping, but positive? Like they're like, it's like some of what we're saying is our presence is probably more valuable in certain respects than it is detrimental, regardless of how, you know, we might think about it, or you know, a lot of masses, you know, I don't know whether or not you think, well, the truth is I am better for humanity for stating all of everything I said.
Well, yeah, we can't know those answers. As I said before, we can't know the real straight line. I can't know the best way to utilize myself, or I'd be doing it, right? But, you know, the trick is, the great thing about this is that, you know, I don't have to do it today. This video that we're making right now could affect people 20 years from now. So it doesn't have to be immediate in terms of its impact. And I'd still, I guess fundamentally, I just argue the best I can do is just honestly express how my brain calculates and what it says. Okay, I mean, I'm not playing a game here. I'm not trying to game the system. I'm just saying the only value I'm making as a contribution is this is how I do my math. Okay, and so I'm explaining the formulas I'm using to add up these numbers, and this is the conclusion I come to. And so in a sense, I'm just saying, look, this is honest. So honest is a good quality. So I'll argue in defense of honesty. And if I have to be pragmatic and say I must produce, you know, whether it's honest or dishonest doesn't matter. It just matters on effect, right? We're just saying fuck causes, what's the effect? Because that's the straight line rule, right? Straight line might be you go out into the city hall and blow your brains out, and you have more impact that way in making the world a better place than talking for 10 years, you know, who knows? So, but I'm just saying the calculation I've done isn't in any way, in my opinion, denying the fact that I can negatively influence somebody. I am aware of that fact.
Sure.
And I think about it. But I also know that if I did it some other way, then I might not have the positive impact I've had either. So, I mean, I know I've positively impacted people because they've informed me of it. So I mean, I have some evidence of it. Let me put it that way. I can't know that I'm winning or losing. You know, I won't know. I'll probably be dead before that question can be answered, whether I was a winner or a loser. So I'm just doing the best I can, and I'm calculating the best I can, and I'm trying to make my life livable and do this brutal philosophy thing where I have to carry it around with me all fucking day long. I mean, I'm carrying this evolution bag of shit, this ugly dead baby bag. I have to carry it around wherever I go now. Okay, it's in my head all the fucking time, and that's no fun.
You're not trying to unwedge yourself from this habit either, right? It's almost a certain stasis of existence that's reiterated in a lot of forms. And I didn't know whether or not you were subduing any truths in your own self. Meaning, if you said, you know, I'm honest about who I am and what I do and what I say, is there anything that you curtail inside of your own being that you don't want to be honest about?
Well, I mean, you just don't walk up to somebody and say, you're incredibly fat. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm not gratuitously honest, you know, in the sense of unnecessarily honest. So yes, I don't reveal things like, you know, do I wipe my ass with my right hand or my left hand? I don't know if you need to know everything or I have to explain everything. So yeah, a lot of my personal psychology, I don't think is relevant to the conversation. So I don't bother spending much time talking about my personal neuroses. You know,
sure. Well, and it is interesting that, you know, like I think I've taken more gaps than you have in terms of going off of the tubes, and they kind of, I think I've retooled things. You retool like mad. I keep thinking that your genres maintain roughly the same. You narrow down on your genres. You're like, this is draft science, and this is the epiphylism, and here's my general thrust, and in some respects, I mean, I suppose that I fall in a certain theme of, oh, it's surreal masochism in art, or some sort of weird esoteric approach and dialogue. But I didn't, it just makes me wonder what the approach towards the medium of YouTube is. Like, you have the internet, you're fascinated by it. You drop the axe saying true or false. I don't know what my legacy will be. Is it going to be good or bad, as if there is a binary future that's unseen, that's only dwells in some sort of agnostic realm, instead of this weird organism called Amenda Gary?
Well, I'm just saying there will be a future and there will be a product. So that's my only argument. You want to say there's not, that's you're right. But I'm just saying, it's going to be a truth there somewhere. Okay. I mean, I have size 10.5 feet. It's just a fact. And, we're not going to change that with a bunch of babble about the future and shit. No, the future is written, and I succeeded or failed. And that's just the truth.
Well, okay. Right. Because you're talking about your mission statement. I'm talking more like, is there such a thing as a song that, like, if your whole channel was looked at as one song that everybody could hear, but other people were getting something different from it at different times. They were seeing it. They were perceiving who you were differently at different times, not as a whole, not as a truth, but as a perspective of different.
Well, let's say, what if we could do like what if questions? What if we all look like, when we did videos, we weren't in the video, and we all look like Max Headroom or something, right? And it all came out in the same voice, like we all had the same voice, and there was no personality, no inflection, no history, and it was just the words that we spoke. You know what I'm saying? Then it's sort of a different conversation. I mean, it's a different argument about the separating the agenda from the fact that we are vehicles. Okay. And we're clunky. Some of us are big giant trucks, and some of us are made out of aluminum, and some of us are made out of steel, and we're all made out of different shit, and we rattle a different way, and we have bald tires or really good tires, or so I'm just saying that part of it unfortunately does have to pollute it. And some of that is the part that people are really coming to see. They're not coming to see what the truck is delivering. They're just going like, "Ooh, it's a truck." Like it's a person who gets a gift or something, right? That's the old joke with retards. They get a gift, and they're like, "Look at this pretty shiny paper." Oh, thank you so much. I love this. It's the prettiest thing. And it's like, no, you're supposed to open it, douchebag.
I know, but you also wrap a present nicely because it has that veneer, because it has something. Look.
Right. Well, I'm just saying though, but it is a distraction from the real function. Doing the surprise. That's part of some other human interaction or sport that doesn't really have anything to do with the end result, which is I want to give you a microwave oven. I don't really care about this whole surprise and unwrapping shit. That's all psychological crap. I want you to be able to cook your food.
I think it's interesting how you pull apart and put together what you find valuable in the case and the truth, and to me, I'm always looking more at the aspects of it. You call it a pollutant, but like if a particular delivery truck, an ice cream truck that came up to my street as a kid, had a dent in it, right? Or I knew that's the one that killed my dog, or something. There's some attachment that is it's not a pollutant it's not about the ice cream, it's the whole experience, it's the whole whatever I bring to it, whatever it brings to me and anyone else. And I'm like, if your channel or my channel or these videos 20 years down the line are affecting people that are maybe like savant, like they're autistic savants in the future, they're like counting the blinks going on in your light in the background, and they're more curious of how your mouth moves, and or what it is that the context is not separate from the vehicle that's delivering the package.
Well, you use the thing that just triggered a thought in my head with ice cream truck, right? Because when I was a kid in one neighborhood I lived in, the ice cream truck and the mosquito fog truck looked exactly the same. So they're both little white trucks, right? And it is just kind of funny that all the kids would go chasing the fog truck. You know, it's this toxic pesticide shooting out of this thing. We're all playing in the pesticide, and it's the same thing. And realistically, the garbage being spewed by the ice cream truck, right? The junk food, that it's just another toxic waste, you know, another thing no good for kids, right? And you know, but the dichotomy of just that, you know, just thinking in those terms is there's two trucks, you know, playing a little slightly different tune, but it's, you know, and a different, obviously toxic and, you know, completely unintended to be toxic, but toxic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I know that's a good twist. See, and I learned to drive a stick shift in this large Dodge, and it was a large Dodge of a neighbor that ran over one of my first pets, and so I always had this weird feeling like every time I got into this truck to learn to drive, as much as I liked driving, that somehow I was impassioned with the notion that I at some point, and I did end up hitting a couple of cats, that I was going to end up fucking up some kid's pet unknowingly in some way. And it was this weird forecasting, but it's a different, you know, that's a different narrative than what you're saying. But I mean, I get, that's what I mean though, is that there's not, my point is that the you know, it's that whole argument, you know, that the medium is the message. It's the entirety of the aesthetic and the vehicle and the presentation. Like if you had a little mousy voice, or if you were Max Headroom just drolling on, you would not be able to touch and nuance via the accent of who it is you are in the way that you do. So your person is part of the delivery process of your message, and then all the other people, like,
yeah, but that's sort of the point that I'm making, is that unfortunately more people are coming out to play in the fog, or you know, enjoy the antics of the truck, you know, rambling down the road in a funny manner, than to appreciate the work the thing is doing is irrelevant to what's entertaining them, and that's really irritating.
I'm interested in how people become myopic and they rub a blind eye to the content that other people are trying to deliver. And that's when I think it's up to the artist to re-deliver the medium, if not in text, then in writing or in verbal form or in recording, or method of presentation, in order, if in fact shooting the bullet of content into the other mind is necessary.
Yeah, I know, but isn't that awful hard to do? You know, when the symphony sounds so good to you a certain way, or and even an artist's style, you know, once you have your style, you have it for a reason, because you see the beauty in it, or the symmetry in it, or the meaning in it. And it's really hard to say, oh no, well, I'm really supposed to do this in crayon, and you know, I have to draw the big word boo somewhere in it so they understand this is a boo painting. And you know, when you start compromising your own aesthetics, you know, for the purpose, then you're almost doing exactly what I'm saying that life forces you to do, which is it's going to force it into some kind of, it's going to take something, it's going to be the rose being converted into the dead petals on the ground. You know, it's just going to tarnish the whole thing.
Unauthentic variants of one's expression. But my thing was style swiping. Learn the mediums of other things and then migrate your style. The point of my style was that my style was changing or migrating, or I was a different technique or a different instrument.
Well, I don't think you were doing that in the sense of, you were saying, I'll show it to somebody and see what they think and allow that to make my decision. I think you were mostly going by the fact that you had your own sense of art appreciation, and you knew, yeah, this isn't a finger painting. Okay, I'll admit, okay, this isn't this bullshit where I take a white canvas and fart on it and call it a painting. Right. I'm doing something different than that.
Like my princess here, right? Very hyper refined. And this woman showed up at a thing, and I said, I'm not selling too much of what I think is my best work. And she says, well, paint worse and sell them for more. And I took that like, holy shit, she's right. Like, and then I started painting my clowns like, holy shit, I can whip these worse paintings out, less technique, less value, less something, right? And then I ended up just blowing everything up into abstracts and finding abstract artists that people really enjoyed and thought, wow, this is so anti-intuitive.
No, but is that really what you as an artist wanted to do? Is that what you felt was your greatest capacity to convert your conceptions and your visions into something? Is that what you wanted to do, is to turn into something commercial?
No, meaning there was already a loss in what it is I wanted to do. So I had certain like kind of like I'm already not
right. I understand the pragmatic. I understand having to be pragmatic. I'm just arguing against it as a
no, it wasn't
an intellectual principle. I'm saying it's one of the things about life that sucks is this whole fucking bullshit of compromise and pragmatism.
Well, no, but hang on. I also wanted to show you this, right? Because this is like, this would be really dumbed down, but some reason, like it's, you know, here, let me cover that, right? Like this is, okay, like this is kind of a dumbed down painting, I think, compared to a princess painting. And yet some people somehow thought, wow, that's really cool. And I you know, and I put some of my worst shit out that I have no pride. There's no authenticity. I put my name on it because I was the organism that made it strictly. And I'm surprised when people buy it. And it has nothing at this point. I'm ripping away my subjective value of greater authenticity of doing it and promoting, commodifying it, right? And so I think that it's peculiar because it's not like me trying to reach towards an ideal or a virtue within myself and always attaining the best glory and representation of self. So I've like self-demeaned. I chopped down the idea of make certain I'm executing everything at the highest idealism that Michelangelo would appreciate, or the Pope, or of his time.
Well, I mean, you obviously don't have to go that far. I mean, you don't have to have that high an ambition in the sense of, you know, you have a high sense of creative style. So I'd argue that even if you didn't have perfect technique, the very fact that you have the conception, so there's two values to art, you know, you could argue, right? There's that knowing what to make and then knowing how to make it. So there's two skills involved. Yeah. And, you know, and so that's the good news in the bad news story. But I mean, we know, well, let's not even get into this artist life because you can't, you're just going to starve to death. No, I mean, it's, you know, the world wipes its feet on art now, especially with all this computer shit and everything else. You know what I mean? I played with a program the other day, and you just hit the button, and it did this magnificent kind of Van Gogh-esque, except much smoother.
Yeah,
and it was like my hair was beautiful, you know, and it was like I couldn't paint that, you know, it was just so perfect. And I was like, how can this fucking piece of software completely do an abstraction that is a real distortion? You know what I mean? It was a real difference than a real me, but it had me in it there. You know what I mean? It was there, and it was in this completely different style. And it was just, I was just looking at it and saying, you know, I could spend weeks working, trying to work a painting to get it that perfect. And the fucking software did it in 30 seconds.
Right. Well, that's the power. And it, you know, it's the John Henry against the locomotive, and even, you know, in the arts in a lot of ways.
Yeah. It's just that's dismal, and I hate it, but it's, you know.
Well, but I watched that most recent video, one of you, where you're upset. Like, I spent 3 hours trying to change the background of this frame of this video, and you're like talking for a significant amount of time about your discontent of not being able to get this particular presentation. And then you even like qualify, like, well, maybe you guys shouldn't be listening to this because all I'm doing is complaining about this. And I thought, wow, now what kind of retooling does Gary need for presentation if this little border is causing this kind of weird throw a wrench in my own machine of it? But you allow it and you still put it out there as a complete video. And I'm like, that's what I mean by like, it's not so much like, oh, well, we're in the future, aliens looking back, and we happen to land on 5 of Gary's greatest videos, and that's one of them. And we're like, what's the truth about Gary and his message? And
I do produce a lot of content, and as much as it doesn't look like it requires any, work, you sort of have to. Even though I don't do any preliminary work to do a video, you sort of do it in the background of your own brain is doing it. I mean, before I went into this conversation, I'm saying, okay, I got to understand. Okay, Dospook is going to push some of my buttons. Don't react. I got to think, I got to think, it's been a long time. It'd be just nice if we keep it, without getting, too nastily personal or some of the bullshit. So my brain goes through the list of Dospook history and context. And so I'm just saying that anything I do ends up being more than what it looks like, because everything has in it that context of how I function to be able to function this way. So I don't think somebody else could do the amount of content I do, and do it in any coherent manner, because it's a hell of a challenge. I mean, until you do it, until you prove you can do it, I'm saying it's not as easy as people think it is. I don't just turn the camera on and all of a sudden I can talk rationally. I mean, my brain has to prepare these sentences ahead of time, in a sense, right? I mean, we don't get to, consciously watch ourselves make stuff. So we don't understand how much preliminary work had to be done for me to even say, we don't understand how much preliminary work had to be done. I mean, my brain came up with that all on its own. You know what I mean? Well, and that just doesn't happen without somebody doing their painting practice. Like you have to draw, and you have to do this, and you have to practice to have any proficiency. And you don't have proficiency doing this without your brain putting in the investment.
Because I was thinking of all the prep that Amanda Forever Wolf Films did in her sculptures and in her that anti-natalist, the elephant video, and then getting on to Osh and stuff. Like, it was kind of a weird scaling of preliminary, like that was her mode of art function, and she kind of laddered through it in a peculiar way that I thought was impressive, because it made me think about how it is I don't utilize certain lattices I'm not building a ladder to climb a meaning towards me. I'm not trying, and maybe I should, and so I'm reminded of how other people approach what it is they're doing with their time, and whether or not they think it's optimum, or whether or not they think it's a miasma, a stirred pot, that they prefer like, hey, I prefer this domain. This is my swamp in Dagobah, and I don't prefer to go out fighting in the galaxy or whatever, or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like,
well, we all have to prioritize, and that sucks too. That's another one of these huge, the future. Like I said, this. I mean, I would have loved to have been able to be born into this generation, in the sense of that, but I'd probably squander it and fuck it up in some way. But I just mean the fact that there is so much you can be interested in, and there is so much you can find to challenge you. I mean, I love programming, I love painting, I love doing all these different kinds of things, and I'd like to do them more, but there's no time in the day, right? You can't, you don't have the option to live this 70-hour day that I'd like to live.
Well, therefore transhuman. I'm kidding. Let me just
no, I'm not against transhumanism. Don't ever get me wrong. I mean, do it all you want, and I'm for putting the brain right in the beaker and going total, virtual life. But I'm just saying that in the end, it's still a wank. There's nothing other than a wank going on, and so it seems to me to build all that infrastructure for wanking is, kind of silly.
Yeah, I just can't. I don't sum the life. For me, I think it's just like, that's the telos. The wank is the telos. It's the end. It's the pop, and even what to consider of that, or a bivalent after notion that I don't even wax that way with you, because I know that's so anti-sympathetic to the thoughts, but and so I retain the, like, in biology and in virtual reality, in the world that we know, what could we say? But I just don't sum like the means are more important than the end. It's not about the end. And
Well, I know, but you just said it was in a sense, and I'm not saying there's a climax to life. You know, the climax is the passion. As I pointed out, I value the passion. I'm just saying I can't, you know, if I put these things on the shelf on the store, kid with cancer or a satisfied passion, I'm just never going to be able to say I'm going to spend my 3 cents and buy the passion and not buy the prevention. I'm going to buy the escape for the prisoners before I'm going to buy more cheese and wine for the privileged.
Okay, get a load of this. Now I'll tell you, like I'm in this program which is compounding compressions, right? With Bitcoin packets, right? But I keep trying to help homeless people. Homeless people will give me chunks of money, or other people will give me chunks of money, and then I'm slowing myself down to make certain that they have something in there. I'm slowing myself down to bring along, like, everybody come with, right? If anyone's willing to get on board, let me help them on board, even at my own detriment of getting the ship to point B faster. It's more like, bring as much of the dying off the Titanic on board, trying to get everybody to feel that's on the ship. And it's just it's such a weird ethic towards, like, ode to the infirmed, ode to those that are not living the peachiest life, like help them live a little bit peachier.
Yeah, well, that's like I said, those are always really tough decisions. It's, me feeding the cats, or all the little stuff you might do that'll distract you from your purpose. And I find that really one of the things that are most irritating about doing anything is the fact that there's all these. You could do something better. You can always make the argument that that this is a waste, or this isn't as productive as you should be, or and it's just irritating that you can't just feel good about the fact that you're helping somebody, because it always is at a price. You don't even have a friend that's free, right? You know what I'm saying? I mean, friendships can be huge liabilities, in the sense that this is now a person you have to care about. You're going to worry for them, and even when you don't care that much and you don't worry that much, you've made a commitment, and sometimes you're obligated by that commitment, and so they'll drag you into their quicksand, and then you're always I have to waste my time not only pulling them out of the quicksand, then I have to get myself the fuck out of it.
And that's one of my, I was just complaining, like, wow, I gave this guy 5 years that fucked me on a project, and he knew damn good and well that a guy had screwed me over in life beforehand because the project was talking about that. And now it's me getting myself out of the quicksand, and then no good deed goes unpunished, sort of like, oh, I'm going to help these people, but you're right, you get entangled in them. And to be honest, even the idea of, holy shit, I'm re-engaging with Gary, when I'm re-engaging with people from a year ago, and I'm re-engaging with people from 2 decades ago, instead of that, no, only pick up the new folk, don't recycle back, because meaning it was more like, how is it? But then I thought, I'm not, like, the idea that I'm going to drown in it. It's more like I know, but by intersecting you, it's going to change my thoughts back to a certain sort of thing. But there's also plenty of newness to deal with it. But I hear what you're saying. Like,
yeah, well, we all need to be rattled a little here and there, right? You got to shake the dust off the the paint or whatever. You got to scrape it off the palette, to use a painter's analogy. You got to remix it a little bit to get the right color, and so I mean, that's why I was willing to do this, is because I said, well, Dospook is part of my history, part of my character. I certainly always had a great deal of there's lots of parts of you I admired, both of the person you used to be, and even the person you have become, because there's no variation in me, right? I mean, I'm the same asshole 10 years ago as I am now, pretty much.
Okay.
You had a huge kind of transition in who Dospook was, what your outside image was, you know what I'm saying? The facade of Dospook was different.
Sure. Well, yeah, I think, even within the same space and the same reiterations and the common reiterations that you have made these little budgings and these little moves, and your personality has, it's almost like seeing, if you're staring at an orange dot and you say, oh, look, it went yellow. Fine. Oh, it went yellow. Oh, now it's red. Oh, now it's orange. And it got a little bigger and a little smaller. Like there's something in how one attends to the little minute changes of people that are consistent, and they're more cardinally locked in a mode, as opposed to the wonky.
Well, it sort of makes it's the same effect, it's just a relative thing. So you're saying you're looking with a microscope versus looking with a telescope, or, well, I guess that's a bad analogy, but, with a regular eye versus the enhanced eye. And there, from those two perspectives, the movement is just as great. I mean, the electron moving away from another electron is just as radical a movement, as whatever, pickup truck moving away from the dump truck. I mean,
Right.
it's the scale is irrelevant. And that's sort of what I'm arguing, though, is that, yes, from my minutia sense of little change, there's always value in interactions, and you don't not learn anything from any of them, and especially ones that are as long as ours. You know what I'm saying? So it has this context that isn't, we needed time off just because I needed time off, just because I couldn't get past the fact that we had nothing to talk about. So we had to step away so we could re-talk about it again, and then figure out again, we have nothing to talk about. We don't agree on anything that matters. Everything that matters, we disagree about. So how can we have a conversation? It won't work. It's impossible. But it's worth replaying with it, because just playing with it is worth something. Just the play alone makes me a better player, makes you a better player. So just the play is good.
Yeah, and so one guy was like, it's the maintenance of an argument, to keep an argument held as an argument. He says the maintenance of that through time is the value. Like he was arguing that you want a difference, and the containment. You don't want a resolution was almost the virtue he was arguing for. And I didn't know, like, the whole, like, my retooling value, like the way I would approach your arguments. I was always trying to come at it, and you were talking about the virtue of how, one time you're like complimenting me on how it was like, oh, Mike's trying to, Spook's trying to figure out one little loophole or one little hole in the argument or something like that, and you're patching it up, and I'm going around it. And even that today, arguing, oh, well, that seems like a masculine aspect, as opposed to, like, I had never generated that argument with you. And I said, like, I was just, and it wasn't like a pre-thought thing. It was just more like that time off and the new experience, and plus in the way your metaphors and your analogies, and maybe you've always kind of been this way, but I had more of an allowance of, like, allow you to talk more in analogy and form, and make certain that you do have your pontification time, meaning you're going to make certain you make your statement where you are recorded. You generally do that, and I think that's a hallmark. That's your hallmark signature, and I think that's what is remains impressive. And I don't want to strip you of you making that stamp of, hey, while we're on the record, let me make this the case. But yeah,
well, I'm always trying to find a new start from the ground. I'm always saying, look, our disagreement starts in the ground. Our disagreement doesn't start in the air. You know what I mean? The problem's always at the pointed gun is never pointed correctly. So I'm always going back to the aim and saying, look, we're not aiming. So this we can't fix it from where the bullet's already fired. We have to fix it from the early point in the conversation, which, generally speaking, drags me back to evolution, drags me back to the actual facts of our mechanism and why we have these attachments and why we think, or why we have these value schema that isn't rational. And that's why we're throwing flowers into the ocean for the people who died the right way, and throwing no flowers for the ones who died the wrong way.
Yeah. They died the same, and they're not really paying attention to who's throwing the flowers at all anyway. But, and I hear what you're saying, but I mean, it was interesting you say from the ground, because right when you said that, before you even said shot in the air, I'm imagining two bats or two birds going at some sort of battle, or the joust game from the arcade games, like, and thinking like, oh, like air fighters, like Like maybe that was my preference.
Yeah, no, it's more like we're both looking at something, you know, and we're, from my perspective, and we're both trying to see the elephant from the same general perspective, and you know, to understand it as an elephant and not to misrepresent it as, you know, a big giant anus or, you know, big fat feet, or, you know what I'm saying. We're both trying to see the same thing the same way.
I don't know about that. Meaning,
Well, I just mean that you're expressing what you see. Okay, in a sense, you're trying to explain to me, hey, look, dumbass, look, I see it right there in front of me. All right, how can you be missing it? And I'm on the opposite side of the elephant, and I'm saying, well, look, the problem is we have to exchange sides now and then, and we have to rotate around this elephant. We have to have some sort of rules for the conversation, because yes, every time you're looking at the front and I'm looking at the ass, we're not going to agree on what an elephant is.
Well, and I just thought the 5 guys filling an elephant, or 2 guys, you know, even the claim like X is an elephant, right? That it's a singular thing made me think, since I don't know what this creature is that I'm feeling, I'm not even going to now no longer say that it is the same thing that you're saying. But then I'm like, oh no, the phenomenology of consciousness in the world, and any way that we can pull it apart. But
well, I'm just saying, there has to be some boundaries to how far we're going to go. Like, you know, I'm not. I don't do this for fun. Okay, so if it was just recreation and it was just fun, I'd say, okay, let's suspend reality and let's do quantum mechanics, and we'll have unicorns, and we'll have, you know, spirit dust, and we'll have the magic world where we're all going to fall into the other universe where everything's rational, and we would just happen to be in the anti-universe where everything's irrational, and blah blah blah. You know, we can do all kinds of speculations about magical ways of forming human identity and blah blah blah. But you know, frankly, to me, that's wanking. Okay, that's not philosophy. That's some other kind of bullshit you do. But that's a weird ass kind of dance. But you know, homie, don't dance.
Well, see, on your planet, it's Mandela effect. On mine, it's Mandela effect, and that's
right. Well, whatever. I'm just saying that we're going to have to agree sometimes that, okay, you're going to say, well, Gary, won't you please, you know, have a party dance with me, and we'll dress up in costumes and we'll do blah, blah, blah. And I'm saying, no, but I'll invite you to dinner. Okay. And we'll like eat real food off of plates, and, you know, we can have some wine and we can talk. But yeah, that's as far as I go. I just don't do the whole Furby costumey thingy and blah, 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 blah. So that's one of the rules I'm just making. I'm saying it's your right to attempt to drag me into fantasy land. But I'm always going to just try to say, no, I'm not going there. So I'm just going to pull you back down to the ground and say, look, I'm just not doing that stuff. Okay. No. I'll do a lot of weird shit, but I won't do that.
Well, you know, I mean, you've done your charades and your dances in your own way, but you don't do them so much anymore. You're pretty strict to business, and you know, I don't know. Your hiking videos, your swimming videos, you know,
well, I'm just saying, but the content was always the same. The content is always looking for the straight line. Okay, I got online. I made 5-minute videos, you know, on subjects, just saying, look, this is the straight line solution to the right to die. This is the straight line solution, the rich are too rich. You know, straight line solution, blah blah blah. So the mission has always been to defend choosing the straight line solution. Okay. The mission was never to do swimming videos.
Oh, right, but now I just wanted to say that for the sake of the few viewers that I know we are going to have, that I was kind of owing this interaction to, is like, for example, you made a video critiquing Logan the movie, right? And you developed a very strict, like, I didn't think you were like, you took an angle to it. And the reason I bring that up is because the movie is a cinematographic production, and one of the people is into character attributions and cinematography and art forms and aesthetic. And I didn't know to what extent you take a non-straight-lined approach to accepting the weirdism instead of trying to dissect, like, the the rudimentary function and the disliking or the.
Well, I certainly can't help to see plot flaws. Some plot flaws are just so egregious that you just can't help but see them. They're just right there in front of your face, like there's nobody goes to the bathroom or something. You know what I mean? Some kind of little obvious things where you're just saying, how would that work? Because you're both on the desert island. You got, blah, 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 whatever. You just these practical things that just don't fit. So plot flaws I'm always going to notice. But I love fantasizing. I mean, I do it all the time. I mean, I have nothing against storytelling and a good story told. I've watched a few times the new Mad Max one, whatever it was called, newer one anyway, the one I saw. And it becomes a better and better movie the more I watch it. And it has a lot of aspects you might appreciate, in the sense of this religious idea of they spray their face with chrome paint, when they're going to do their maximum sacrifice act, and this whole idea that somebody would witness them, and they have this little thing where they when they talk about the dead, they reach out and pull them into their heart, this, and it has these, they're just beautiful psychological mechanisms, that make the story so much richer than just some stupid, throw fire bombs at cars moving 50 miles an hour and do all kinds of wacky shit, walking on top of shit. I mean, it's a really good, there's really good elements of deep psychology in a movie with almost no dialogue. And, that's basically an action film, what I'm saying. So I'm just saying it's a really good device, that it's a really good construction. It really holds up, is my point.
Well, and I immediately thought of the new Blade Runner movie, and then I just went to see the latest Thor movie, which was like an homage of as much data as you could throw, stealing from the Transformers and Star Wars and myth and quirky humors, and yet I just thought, like, wow, it's just weird what is combined in a Thor movie, but then the aesthetic, the cinematography, how they spent time on the ambience of the background view of the visuals in Blade Runner was really interesting. And then I just saw that Vincent, Loving Vincent, the Painterly movie, and it was so nice because they're painting a character, and they're using the same canvas, but you can see how the paint is, like, they're covering up where the object is moving on and refilling in the background in every motion that the individual's making, right? And yet trying to retain the like you said, the
it's an interesting form of animation. I don't know whether it's very practical, but I saw clips of it. I didn't see the whole movie, but I just saw some clips of the work done, and it was an interesting.
Yeah,
it really did say something. I don't know whether the story, the way they're telling it, says anything, or the characters are well enough developed for me to say it's a good movie. But it's certainly.
And the thing was about Van Gogh, I mean, they was like, the movie took place shortly after he died. It was an interview. So all the people being interviewed about him were painted in his style. But then when the memories of him came about, it was all painted in more of a realistic black and white style, still animated, still painted, but more of a realism as opposed to his flowing movement.
Yeah, well, it is interesting, the Van Gogh thing, just because they, the movies they've made about Van, or even the productions, because they had one where Spock, Leonard Nimoy read Theo's letters.
Yeah.
And they showed in, the background was all of Van Gogh's paintings. And so it was just a one-man show, but it was really, profound. I mean, you gained a real appreciation through it. It was a great presentation. Maybe the message is bullshit, but I'm just saying, it was presented so well that it didn't matter if there wasn't anything behind it besides some story about two brothers who cared about each other.
Well, and I like the $6 million man against the Bigfoot that's also a robot, meaning that it's not brothers. It's just this really trite crap that I just love B-rate movie histories and weird old TV shows and the quirky, wonky, limits and aspects. And I don't know. I don't know.
I see some of that as to me just being a traditionalist. I just find some of that stuff comfortable. You know, an old black and white movie is so much easier to consume in some ways, you know, but you're not distracted by all the cinematography in a way. You know, the image is moot enough to make the story the more real.
Right.
Know?
Right.
It's like reading a book in big text versus a book in little text or something. You know, it's just so much more consumable for a part of me. You know. Yeah. It's just, you know, but I'm just saying that's just I imagine that's just me personally, just because that's my comfort zone. But I really do love old black and white movies.
Yeah, now, well, and that, you know, the movie Airplane, the comedy, apparently was a remake of a black and white movie almost verbatim that was satired, and that there's some video on it. And I remember watching the movie, the black and white one, after I saw that, thinking exactly what you're saying, like the black and white nature of it was, but yeah, I mean, there's just something nostalgic about it. It's like using an old typewriter with
Yeah, and the funny thing is that once you know a story, like I remember the one colorized movie that really impacted me was there's a Scrooge movie, you know, with Alistair Sim, and well, anyway, it's my favorite Scrooge movie, and you know, Christmas Carol movie. And you know, forever it was black and white, and then they colorized it, you know, and everybody hated it. Everybody hated the idea they colorized it. Yeah. But they did it in a way that was really interesting because he was wearing a purple jacket. You know, I mean, the colors were so overdone,
yeah,
that it gave such personality to the characters in a sense. And so in a way, it's like taking your old story and modifying it does give you more because it startles you or whatever. Do you know what I'm saying? And if it's done right, like I said, if the colors are right, colors that you appreciate, it just feeds you even more information. It says to you, this story means even more because look at these colors are the right colors.
The end of the last Star Wars, right when they showed Carrie Fisher as the young Princess Leia, the computer animated, I was like I was fucked up. Not unlike the same way you're describing that kind of painted on candy. Like I wasn't expecting that weird spectral color or whatever they called it at the time of painting each film frame. And I mean, I'm weirded by the shocks of difference from what you assume. I don't know.
Well, it's just interesting to find that you have triggers, you know, that you didn't know that's a trigger. There's a trigger. There's little triggers that you can't get to me, you know, little things will get to me and I'll be so surprised by them getting to me. And it's fun to kind of analyze why is that getting to me? You know, why did that trigger me?
Yeah, you know? That was his job upon meeting you and other people is first figure out their personal triggers, plug all the heartstrings, get that shit out of the way, and then start going after the argument, or you know, around and aboutly. And but I mean, and you've done it too. Meaning you became an artist of the, you know, like you're the sucker punch. You're the knock them out with the first blow sort of guy. Just like chop them up. I'm gonna bring the fucking chainsaw out and just obliterate. And I mean, it's just interesting technique of how you're dealing with populations of people where you're trying to form a position or an argument or a manner or a personality and have to defend it, have to war, and how one negotiates with other individuals in even the idea of warring is taken differently now because now it's a drone war and it's, you know, the troops aren't shooting the other ones, they're shooting above the heads of their enemy instead of like trying to
yeah, that's a good metaphor just because it's the idea of a battle. Like in the old days you actually had to kill somebody face to face, and it's like there was a certain charm or, you know, integrity to that, you know, where this press a button and, you know, blow up a family and, you know, 10,000 miles away is just so different, you know, in terms of, oh, that's still war. No, that's not war. And so, yeah, some of me feels like you know, as much as I love this technology stuff, it also creates a kind of Borg that you're fighting. You know, you're not even fighting, you're fighting an animation of humanity, not any real humans. You're fighting the trolls and the spammers and the jackasses. You know, you're not really, you're not, you don't get to, you know, it's like it's like even in the old days, they used to give you after the news, they'd have that little 3-minute segment where some crank goes on TV and he says, I don't agree with anything that motherfucking newscaster said, you know, this is all bullshit, it's a conspiracy, and blah, blah, you know. And so he had you know, as much as everybody was silent, they almost had more of a voice with that one character that got to say, you know, the world's all fucked up and I'm not going to take it anymore. You know, the network thing was almost more, that was almost more of a voice than this crazy world where it doesn't matter. I mean, if you actually did go to City Hall and blow your brains out, everybody will just complain about the mess you made. I mean, there won't mean anything. Like I said, if I made a video and say, I'm going on a hunger strike tomorrow and I'll be dead in 28 days, no one care, right? It'd be like, let's go watch the guy starve to death. It'd be fun. You know.
No, I know a guy online that just went through. I mean, I guess it was last year. He decided, for political reasons up in Canada in his province, he decided he was going to go on a hunger strike, and it lasted about 5 days. And then he acquiesced and made a public statement. You know, and other people were, you know, he was exactly what you said. It was more like, okay, let's see how this goes. Let's see how ineffectual this is. You know, like, oh, is my little stunt going to catch on and go viral, or is it, you know, is it everything is so pocketed into certain absurdities, where back in the day it was certain things like that.
Yeah, well, how do you compete with you know, 12-year-olds who stream their suicide live? I mean, you know, you can't really compete with that. You know?
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing. You're right. The generation now has a history, and this is what I thought. You know, when full lives are recorded, you know, that's why I like movies where you see the same actor when they're young kids and they're grown to adults and then they pass away, because then you can condense a whole life in these movies. And then YouTube's going to start condensing lives, and pretty soon you're going to see whole lifespans and things in synopsis and paraphrase form, and people will start generating more views, I think, in the future, like compounding, compressing, and seeing media that represents the lives compounded and pressed, so that they can make more quick decisions about, hey, is this something I want to do, or is it something I don't want to do, or what are the options, and can I genetically manipulate my kids, or should I blow my own head off now, or cut my ween, or turn, you know, whatever they want to choose. Is just more of a perceptual crunch.
Yeah, we're all stuck with having a narrative. But see, yeah, so you triggered me with the statement about, you know, you like the whole continuum, and I'm exactly the opposite. Because to me, if you do that to, like, even the Seven Dwarfs or Sleeping Beauty, you know what I mean? If you don't have the happily ever unanswered, undescribed doom that they're going to fall into, right? I don't want to see Sleeping Beauty at 85, you know, with ovarian cancer, you know, dying with tubes stuck up her ass and all that shit. I don't want to see the Seven Dwarfs. I don't want to watch them all die. You know, some stupid, horrible death. The rock falls on Sleepy, and, you know, Dopey gets a brain tumor. And, you know, I don't want all that context, because it steals from, you know, the idea of being alive and being, you know, strong. And, you know, you just don't want to see the Terminator. I'm old and rusty, and, you know, stop doing that, dude, or I'll be, what did I say? I forgot. What, I'll be back, or something like that. What was my lines? You know, who wants to see that shit, right? You don't want to see that.
When I went to a nursing home and watched people die, and then I came back, like, the meaning is in the media, and so the irony is that you're saying, I don't want to see Snow White at 85, and I'm thinking, well, Shirley Temple already.
Well, not for fun. I'm just saying, when I'm watching something to feel good and to enjoy, but see, the context will destroy it. I mean, watching them obliterated is going to be so uncomfortable and painful that why would I want to watch that? I mean, it's like watching John Wayne die in his movies or something. It's like, no, you can't kill. It's like if Unforgiven, if they killed Clint Eastwood in the end, right? you'll all be like, fuck, this movie sucked. You know?
I'm just saying, like, I think it's pretty much inevitable that the more we pierce into things, the more people of the future will actually see a whole crunched spectrum, and that they can slow it down and open it up and look
Well,
at
I think they're already seeing it. I mean, that's why I think for all the sophisticated people, that's why birth rates are down, is because humans know this is a trap. They're starting to figure it out that this is Freddy Nightmare's instrumentality, and that it's all created to create a horror house that you're walking through, and you're going to get your arms and legs hacked off if you don't walk real careful.
I argue with people, like, with the whole cryptocurrency. Like, there's a lot of dystopic people, and then there's a lot of optimistic people, and then people that don't even consider it. And my thoughts are, especially coming amongst this Utah Mormon kind of keep your head up, look on the bright side. I think there is kind of more of this. Yeah, we know that people are dying, but we're just going to, lay our myth over it, and then keep really positive, such that there's still a lot of people, I still think, they'll see life and they'll still say, well, they'll find a virtue even in the maggot piled piss death, meaning that there's still some people that are going to see the bright side. Meaning I know that they're there because I meet them. But I know what you mean also, in that the more people see it, the more wise they'll come to it, and hopefully they come to what you think is, your goal of it. Mine is more like, no, we're so close to some sort of transhumanism passing, pain reduction and mitigating and ending that. And so it's a splintered spectrum of let life naturally come to an end, or to the cure, the notion, the ideal, like I always think people always have a mind's eye blind spot. Their mind's eye has a blind spot like their regular eyes, and that they rub it over to help them negotiate the terrors of what they assume is happening in their world. And so I don't know. Meaning, I still think, for as much wisdom as you bring to the table with what you predict or speculate of how things might be, I know that there's other people that somehow navigate that same mindscape with a different thought, a different.
Yeah, well, I think logic just comes down to the bottom line is waste is bad, and there's just no way to calculate this as being anything other than reckless waste. I mean, it's too sloppy. The game can be understood to be no win, and the amount of victims it creates. Again, like I said, the mechanism is made out of that. The whole idea of this genetic replication is built on the fact that you build a lot of copies and kill most of them in a brutal manner to prove you're victor, to make your last gladiator that gets to replicate. There's a bunch of broken bones and ripped to pieces flesh on the battlefield, and it's just silly.
That didn't impregnate the woman, all them dead sperm. I have to do one prayer for each one every day. Every time I blink, each kind of
yeah, well, I'm not going to engage in an argument about the death of a sperm, but whatever. I mean, frankly, there's nothing stopping nature from putting a brain in one and actually killing zillions of something in a brutal manner for a minor purpose. So I'm just saying, it just, anyway, either way you look at it, that is it's a futile waste for nothing but a notion in the human head. It's not some articulated fact of, hey, look how perfect and great we are and how we're a cure to the universe's boredom. It's just, there's just no argument to defend our function and beyond our own perception of worth. We see it. It doesn't exist in the reality. It just exists in our perception.
Well, and it is that self-inclusive perception that one allows themselves to get lost in, like block out the horror, maintain this, and then expand, and then I have offspring, because the expanse of my blindness and my keeping the horror on the outside allows this domain of, like, it's kind of like the whole idea of like, oh, in certain fraternities or organizations, it's like people, you might not get along with everything all the guys do within a like a company or something, but it's your job to never speak against them. I'm not speaking on it. I heard this as an ethic, right? Like if people are in agreement, like you belong to this said group of family, right? You don't go against your family, meaning they may do shit you don't like and you may move away from them, but when you're speaking to anyone on the outside, you don't defame them and you don't accent what it is that person did wrongly as kind of a code of conduct. And so by that same virtue, I think people use that as a, well, we're inclusive, we're going to breed, but we're going to blind, we know the horror, but we're not going to speak about it, like speak no evil, and then just continue on your way.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying that the appeal of rationalizations and justifications is the whole thing. Why religion has been durable, and I'm saying those are all bad reasons, not good reasons. So they're all cheats of the truth and all compromises against the truth, and they're made quite aggressively. So I don't have anything to say to that except that's just part of the vice of humanity, part of their crime against the truth, crime against their own dignity, crime against their own intelligence. I mean, it's a crime against your intelligence to think a god made it. It's a crime against the very capacity to think, to make up these fake narratives of superior function when you have such inferior, the evidence of your inferior product is so glaring, and the inferior product of humanity is so glaring. The huge price it paid in these silly wars and all this silly waste of all the deprivation and poverty, and that's just the human element. Again, like I said, most of the experience of life is happening in organisms who don't have our capacity to understand how they're being brutalized and cheated and abused, and how deserve has nothing to do, it should not be an acceptable standard. We deserve better than to exist in a world where deserve has nothing to do with it. That is not an acceptable present. That's not an acceptable gift. Here's the gift of deserve has nothing to do with it. No, that is not a gift.
Well, and I remember early on in my arguments, like with you or otherwise, it was the idea that for you to build your actual home, you had to displace mice and ant populations, and that was a huge abuse. Like my dad flushing a spider down the sink, or us, if our sperms had some sort of that neuro, like they could feel pain, and that we were somehow separating ourselves off from this sub, like, our sub haploid with a sense of discare, knowing that the world is horrific. Even if our sperm could feel this agony of their drying and or whatnot in cold air, or the spider, to the extent that our minds allow a closed group of like individuals in tribal, I almost want to say cultural tribal rule systems that are almost go unspoken in some relative aspect. Now, I'm not saying they're evolutionary per se, but I'm saying they're a result of grouping or historic tribal movements as they've grown. That certain conditioning comes about that may have some sort of offspring in genetics, meaning there might be some genetic factor to it. But I know what you're talking about. Meaning I'm not. This is where my tie is that even the idea of what is reasonable and truth, the limit of the periphery of my not only consideration, but within the limit of my consideration, there's a limit of care. I mean, there's only so much time of day for me to people screaming outside over some pithy argument about losing their keys, or you pissed me off, or anyone's argument that is upsetting, or the like your personality, and some aggravating people that like a calm sort of, like, we have to have a boardroom sort of approach towards YouTube, right? Meaning to hear the aggravations, to put oneself in the mode of care. It's almost like if somebody's killing a dog in China, I'm not spending my time like impassioned by it because it's not in front of me. But and so it's this more like, how does my mind, how do minds, or how do I believe other minds, relative to family and friends and community, or icons that they care about, how do they care about, how do those coalesce, and then what is outside of that. And reasonably, you're right, it's all there in mass infinitely, meaning there's more googleplexes of life out there that are feeling and suffering and living and dying than my mind can wrap around, let alone my compassion. And so there has to be some sort of limit or degree or
Well,
something.
that's the challenge of the conversation. That's why I have to rely on metaphors. Is I have to try to create an analogy or a story where the person can understand that this is like a store that you walk into, and we have this choice, to buy somebody protection and relief from horror, or we can buy pretty girl to have sex with, or these are the choices that we can buy it with the same amount of money. We can do this commerce, and so it's yes, there's no way for anyone to comprehend even I've used the analogy of rodents or something. I mean, billions of them, going through these horrible life cycles. And you bring up the bug dying. Well, the bug's going to die anyway. And it's likely that if you kill it quickly, you've done it a favor compared to the little microorganisms that'll kill it slowly. And certainly you're killing it before it breeds, maybe. And so that's even a positive, because now it doesn't have progeny to be eaten and killed, and it doesn't have to, they won't do any more killing. So, I mean, this whole argument is about the process of life and the whole process of, the metaphor of a lifeboat. You just don't play the game called lifeboat. You just it should be agreeable that no, we're not going to play lifeboat. It's not a viable game. It's a game for insane, sadistic people or masochistic people, but it can't work for a person who isn't a masochist or a sadist. It just can't work for that person.
But then and maybe my masochism was a condensation of my belief that life, with its suffering and sufferability, as masochism, meaning that the death is there, meaning it's a full extension outward of saying, yes, I am here masochistically living, and I know I'm aware of my death, so I ritualize it on a condensed level because, and it's almost a
I know, but that's like gaining courage to jump on the grenade. And you know what I'm saying? I'm saying, okay, maybe that's a necessary step for you to actually jump on the grenade, is you have to imagine yourself as the hero and having the ticker tape parade, even though you're going to be dead, but you know what I'm saying. You imagine the value to give you the courage to blah, blah, blah. And we can do the same thing in the opposite way with the narrative. We can beautify the ugly and uglify the beauty, and we can paint we can paint it a lot different than its reality. And I'm saying that yes, all our culture and all our institutions are painting an abstraction that is so distant from any reality and detail.
Okay, I wanted to bring this up as an idea, and I'm not even certain how to get into it, but because I said, oh, we're coagulated spirit dust, right? Meaning, like, almost talking like, well, we're just biological voxels at the, electrical lined up voxels within a that were more condensed and functioned here, and they move through these evolutionary cycles. Yes, but within whatever current frame we're in, it's almost like, well, we're just electrical bits, like we are, like the iRobot or the Blade Runner, or the Luke Sky. I am machine. I am just particle aspects that have the, meaning the whole thing that your argument rests upon, not your argument rests upon, is the value of the suffering, right? Like, hate, the pain is the value. But and I'm not trying to focus on that. What I'm trying to get at is the idea of what does your universe in terms of media and symbols, like tea leaves in your environment, like reading the tea leaves. Like, do you ever look at your environment outside of media as, you know, oh, there's a creek and the sound and the cat and the light and some sort of synchronicity or almost digital patterning? Is there, do you see anything, you know, any ghost in the machine in the actual, you know, analog of your life? Like, do you have that, do you have an aspect of seeing some sort of,
Well, I mean, like I said, I've obviously, I gotta just argue that my sexual passions create value in some kind of slimy pussy or something. You know what I'm saying? Something that is practically described as nothing magical, and yet my brain somehow says this is magical. You know, so there's an example of, yes, I'm vulnerable to those deceptions from the structure of biology in terms of finding some things aesthetic. Some smells are very attractive. Some smells are very repulsive. I don't get to decide those. I don't intellectually choose which ones stink and which ones are beautiful. My psychology and physiology does all that work for me. So yes, I'm vulnerable to those things. But yes, I would argue that I make every effort to understand that my brain is just arrangements of mechanical little bits, and that there's a certain minimum amount of bits that you put together that creates the sensation of pain. And if I could draw it as a little dot pattern, it would be the same for somebody else and you and anybody, that the pain thing has a similar pattern to it. The dots would have a similar appearance, your pain, my pain. And the same thing with I won the lottery. You know, and this is the dot, this is the configuration of what you feel when you win the lottery. Right. You know, and that's just a configuration. If I could draw it anywhere and put it in space, I could just put I won the lottery configuration, brain configuration out there in space somewhere. It's still a reality. It's still something meaningful in that there's this sensation of joy and relief and you know, I'm deburdened, right? All the burden has been lifted. The sword has been pulled out of my anus. You know, my life is now charmed. And you have that for 5 minutes, and then you start realizing that you have a bunch of problems still. But anyway, you know, you know, but that's all it is. It's just a brain configuration. So I don't see there any hope for any kind of spiritualness to it. It's just a configuration of little atoms and neurons and bullshit and little tangled wires, and they all got tangled in a specific way based on how I got smushed through a uterus and flushed into this cesspool, and how I dodged the little turds and blah blah, swam my way to the shore and stood up and said, I am alive. And you know, so what? I'm just a brain configuration. There's nothing, you know, so what? I'm alive. Well, I just meant talk something else. Do a commercial or something for Bitcoin, and I'll be back in a second. I just gotta let the cat in.
Okay. Well, what I was gonna say to that with Gary was the idea, like everything about the brain and sloshing and the analog of the organism with organs in a biosphere of being. Is I consider that different than the digital environment, the symbolic environment, or the idea that there are like maybe higher frequencies of like a mathematical organization within one's static digital universe that would have some sort of like meaning that wasn't just speculation of the mind reading it, but an actual presenting of a patterning within nature that also like form fit to one's environment, that had a type of not necessarily intended intelligence to it, but an organizational intelligence to it that may have some sort of directed intelligence to it. Like
I just see it as all aberrant psychology, or all just variation of a pinball machine. And the question is whether pinball has any value, not whether some certain kind of pinball has value. But clearly we could all say, I'd like to be able to construct myself into the perfect me, which would, I'd have Richard Burton's voice, and I'd have, I could pick and choose what I was psychologically, what kind of, how my passions were regulated and how perfect, like, I'm Roger Moore. I have Roger Moore's this, and I have, I could go through each Bond character and say which Bond, I'd have the attributes of each one, and I'd build my own little, ideal human. And in the end, I still just have a human. It's still a Frankenstein monster, in my opinion. It's still just a pile of parts. And one of the parts is this psychology that aggrandizes anything, subjectively, with the same thing that makes you horny or hungry it's not a quality the food has, broccoli or English cheese or whatever, Fruit Loops. It's not them that have a quality. It's our what we've imposed on it. We've made it mean something. It itself was just cruddy cereal or microbe enhanced protein or whatever. It's we're the ones. We've imposed a truth on it that is not the truth. We've imposed a perception and an evaluation that has nothing to do with what it actually is. And we've done exactly the same with our own lives.
Right. I was just thinking, like, when I take supplements or I exercise or I notice that my metabolism or my libido peaks up, or I go through some sort of cleaning process and flossing or some sort of like irrigational thing, my approach to my world shifts dramatically, because maybe I am more horny here, when if I didn't exercise and I was more lethargic, I'd be less inclined to approach maybe women or look at things in some way. And so you say, oh, well, I'm imposing it, but I'm also, I am it at that time. Like at that time, that is the nature of, how my being is interacting with its environment. And so whether I'm imposing it or not, it's the same. It's just a differing percent. Like I'm always like, just to be conscious, just the phenomenology of consciousness, if I was to use your language, would always have a necessary imposition or projection. And so even if I shift, I see the variance of the projection, or what you would call the imposed projection on the world. And it's, and that's where I'm like, well, there's 8 billion different human variations of that. And there's commonality amongst them, and there, but it's just, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not certain. Like I can't separate out the idea that the perception and what is like it, the perception of how one engages their world based on who they are. Meaning they can't like, when I am angry in the world, and my reaction is felt in the world. And when I'm in different stages in tone, that the tone is what is the case, right? Like that's how I see it. And so I guess all I'm saying is that the idea that at one point it's merely psychological, and at another point it's an expression of my biological tone or metabolistic frequency or level, seems like it's not like to say, well, this is psychological imposition and this is an expression of your being in the world. It would be like a hard line, a discrete line, instead of diffuse spectral, like extension. And I don't know. I think that's where I'm at with my, I keep extending spectrums of consideration instead of dropping an axe where people drop their axe. And when people do drop their axe, I criticize the binary where they drop it.
Yeah, well, my counter to that would just be the explanation that we're all byproducts, and we don't create ourselves. We are just a byproduct of this slop that we go through, and that's all just so circumstantial. And so in some sense, that's pretty humbling, and it puts me in check in terms of recognizing that even if I do something admirable, I'm not doing it because I did it. I'm doing it because I was programmed to do it, and I acquired knowledge that it was necessary. And so it's like, even if you jump on the grenade, it's not really a selfless act because you're doing it because you respect and honor something, and you're doing it for the honor. You're doing it to acknowledge your appreciation for something. So in a sense, it is a selfish act, and that's all we can act out of. But I'm just saying, on all that is just so randomly produced. It's just so, yes, there's a certain probability that there'll be a certain number of psychotics in the world, and there'll be a certain number of neurotics, and a certain number of, and it's just, you just end up being one of those people in that class. And I just happen to be one of the people who grew up never being a Borg member. I mean, I never had a moment from my first conscious moment. My first conscious moment was not something like, oh, fantastic, I'm here. And my first conscious moment was, what the fuck? I mean, I sensed danger, and I sensed something to be concerned about, because it all seemed quite dangerous.
Well, when I see pictures of young adolescent boys, like on, and it reminds me of my own adolescence and kind of my doe-eyed, hey, everything's okay, but it's really kind of simple and not like I'm vulnerable to the world, but I'm really strong as this young boy in the world, kind of just ricocheting, not knowing that I'm just kind of dumbly walking around, but I knew that I wasn't super strong, and that like being a weak, like a bean pole, literally, that's very weak as it's growing up, and it doesn't have good stock, it doesn't have girth, and it's not holding its position in its environment yet. So it's, and I mean, that's part of the growth cycle of the youth, is to realize that, hey, I'm not the strongest thing on the planet. And then a lot of kids, that's when bowling, you get like, hey, hey, I'm gonna break this fight up, or hey, I know.
Yeah, well, I think that's what makes a risk-averse person. But obviously, you didn't grow up that way, so something must have changed somewhere where you didn't learn from that.
Well,
you learned an opposite lesson, because that's not the lesson I learned. I learned that everything's destructible. I learned that I can go out in my front yard and I can kill 1,000,000 ants, and they're all vulnerable, and everything's vulnerable. And I remember sitting in a tree, another one of these little moments. Maybe I was 5 or 6 or something, and a hurricane was coming, because I lived in the South, and the sky got just pitch black, and there's 40-mile-an-hour, 50-mile-an-hour winds, and I'm sitting in this tree, and it wasn't too tall, maybe high, 10 feet high. And it was just this, I had just such a clear sense of how this is what it's going to be. There's this doom. And if it doesn't happen today, it's going to happen someday. The hurricane's going to get me. This black cloud is going to show up.
Right.
It's going to rain hard on me. And I felt no wish to play the game. I felt no wish to make this bargain. Where did I sign up to be a victim in this fucking meat grinder? Where did I say I want to play? Because I don't want to play. And that was my conclusion, that this isn't a game worth playing.
Right when you were saying that, because I grew up with 3 families, and each one of them had 3 kids, and they were roughly the same age, and we go to these houses, and I climbed these trees. We'd all climb the different trees at the houses, but one of them was, and it got really vulnerable, and certain kids would fall out or cry, or they couldn't get up, and the other ones would be up, and then they put a swing on the bottom of one tree, and that was easy for the non-daring kids. And then the older son of another family put a bungee cord on it, where you kind of put your foot in it and you jump, and it was more of this like, we know everything's fucked up, because the dad in the family cut the head off of a chicken, started plucking it, and we're watching. Like, that devastated me. But even that vulnerability of being in a tree in the wind, I remember those moments, almost with how much higher can I go to not just impress them in competition, but to like test myself, and then who dared to bungee jump first, or did they? What did it take to trust it? What did it take to play within the tree, within a storm, within these different? And to me, it was more like when the wind would blow and you'd see the shit blow away and you saw shit burn and everything. It was more like, I don't know, maybe it was more of a wizardry or more of a magnanimitude of like the power of storm. It wasn't a sense of doom and like my life is doomed. It was more of a, what the fuck am I gonna do? Like more of a blindness, like I don't know what this is about. I don't know what this life. It was more of an existential.
Yeah, well, I guess that's what I'm saying is that my conclusion was it wasn't about anything. There's no God, there's no magic to any of this stuff. This is just a hurricane coming. They've been coming for hundreds of years, and they just do this stupid thing because that's what weather does. And there's no good reason. There's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just this chaotic swirl of crap. And it's like, why am I in this game of dodging these Damocles swords? Where did I sign up for dance around the swords? I have no will to be a sword dancer.
Yeah, and when I saw the storms and the leaves, like I'd see, to me it was more of an interest, a beauty of it, but the beauty was always out there. It wasn't in me.
Yeah, well, I can't say I didn't have some positive experiences in trees, so don't get me wrong. I mean, I loved heights when I was a kid, so I'd climb trees high, where you'd be waving pretty good, and and I had dreams all through my adolescence. I always flew in my dreams. I didn't land. I never landed very well. I never like landed on my feet. I'd always kind of be going pretty fast and just kind of tumble and crash. But I loved flying, and
That was a rare dream for me. Flying was rare. I was always on the ground. I had monsters attacking me in dreams.
Yeah, no, I have to say I was kind of lucky in the sense that I didn't have nightmares when I was a kid, which is really, I've had more of them now in the sense that they're not really nightmares with monsters, they're nightmares of reality, like the cat's dead or something, that something's caught in a blender. My dreams are just, people being horribly brutalized. I don't even die in my dreams now anymore, and I used to die in them. But yeah, it is. I have to say that, for a very troubled kid, I had dreams that were really very pleasant. Overall very pleasant.
That's an opposition, meaning that's a contrast to mine, where and I had wompy, weird, no pleasant dreams, but I also had plenty of horror dreams, and a flight dream was a real rarity and a gem to have. And it is weird because, like you said, you had a waking sense of doom and your dreams were pleasant.
I guess that's what the brain does, right? It's challenging you in the places where you're not challenged. So I guess it knew I was already beat up enough in real life that it needed to give me some kind of something attractive and pleasant to strive for. So it was like give me a little pep talk or something. It's doing a little life propaganda or something. And my dreams were just, my brain, maybe it knew that if we pile any more on, if we dump some nightmares on this kid, he's gonna, he'll jump in front of a car.
Well, yeah, and I mean, some of my moves were the weird shift, like allowing full subconscious notions, I guess, to really permeate and move me into reality. Like, oh, the Smith program in the last Matrix enters and actually blinds Neo, and it was more like the myth of everything got moved into the reality, and everything got skewed through, so that the idea of a border between subconscious consciousness and the case, what truth is, what non-truth, what any variant, like the variance itself became skewed. All x equals x became x equals x to the 1, or x equals x to the 2, or just x equals, or like, hey, the x on the left doesn't equal the x on the right, obviously, and like anything that was a twist of contrast or a mirror, an irony, or something of being seems somehow. I mean, obviously there was a vulnerability to crash through my limits and thrash me, and I think that's like I think certain things can do that to some people, but yeah, I don't know. It's so weird. The contained dream, the horror, the flight in a tree, the being pushed around. But it made me wonder while you were saying that. I had this assumption, like somehow you were living, mostly growing up with as an only child, like you're out in the woods, you know, like.
Yeah, no, I had 3 sisters, you know, so it wasn't uncrowded. And that's probably why I'm a feminist. So I had 3 sisters. So yeah, no, there was nothing. I didn't have a bad childhood. It's just that I had a bad attitude, you could say, in the sense that I was already looking at the game. And so by the time I was 11, I was already to call myself an asshole. So by the time I was 11 years old, I had figured out, oh, I'm a selfish son of a bitch. You know, that everything I think is a wheel. You know, I'm turning the wheels about how I can manipulate the people around me and how I can get advantage and how I can look best for the girls and how I can do. And I'm saying, what a cunt I am, because I don't have a single emotion that has anything to do with any genuine concern for anybody except me. Right. And you know, having that realization, I would argue, I suppose, at like an age like 11, makes it very difficult to navigate your life, because all of a sudden I can't just date girls trivially. I can't do a lot, you know what I mean? All these things that you might need as experiences, I can't experience that because I have to consider the fact that I'm now knowledgeable about how my motives are not the only motives involved here, and that my ambitions are not the only ambitions, and that my feelings are not the only feelings. And that makes life really difficult to play, you know, when you have to consider, you know, am I really good enough for her? You know, when you have to actually ask yourself that question, it's not so much, will she have me? The question is, am I going to be better than the other asshole that might show up? You know, and I have to answer the question, am I going to do the right thing? Am I going to be attentive enough? Am I going to be this? Am I going to be that? Or am I going to be about me? You know, am I going to be too selfish to do somebody else any good in a relationship? I mean, those are all, that's pretty challenging bullshit for somebody 13-year-old to have rolling through their head as they, you know, try to navigate a fun existence.
And in contrast, having only brothers, no sisters, and my mom wearing the pants in the family, being a feminist herself, but in some way, you know, it was weird because I did move women, like the boy-girl relationship. I assumed a lot of things as equal and not as like a hetero. I need to care or concern myself about who they are. They functionally were, they were like, I was attracted to them, and they were the same but enough different. And my mom always reminded me, like, Mike, play the game. And I'm like, what game are you talking about? I don't get this game thing. And somehow you locked in of, I get this game, like I know the game. And then you had to develop the compassion relative to women because you had sisters in the difference where for me, I didn't even, you know, I didn't figure out even the idea of what the game was of life or playing the game, right? This weird notion, like I couldn't figure out what the fuck is she talking about? The game, right? But for you, it was more like maybe as intuitive as it was for my mom to lock in on this, but and you know, I don't know, and whether or not I was good enough for a woman didn't matter because I didn't have a notion of what it meant to have any responsibility towards a woman. I was just this free range hormonal.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying is that early experience, like I said, Louisiana was a really, you know, there was so much life there that's thrown away casually all the time that I became so aware of mortality and you know, the price paid. And so, you know, because they're all pets to me, you know what I mean? They're the you know, rhinoceros beetle on the driveway was a pet. It wasn't, you know, it was like a cat, you know, it wasn't something you could trivialize.
Right.
You know, it was meaningful, and so everything that happened there, it was so brutal a place because all the people were so you know, gratuitous in their um, disrespect for animal consciousness. You know, I mean, they were just so brutal that yeah, it was impossible for me to make sense of it. I mean, I couldn't find the world a comforting place because I couldn't find any part of humanity that was at all something I wanted to run to and hug. You know what I mean? It offered me no, there was nothing, you know, pulling me towards it. There was just this horrid repulsion.
Well, and I mean, even this discussion on childhood and perceptions and location and stuff, it's like it does like quickly, you know, repaint like a okay, you know, and whomever might listen to this, but including ourselves, kind of like try to retrace what the other one's path may have looked like or developed in their I mean, that's what I mean by like I think every
Well, this is the real challenge, right? I mean, I didn't have to acquire a philosophy, right? It was imposed on me. So it's like me having sisters and you not. So now I'm sitting here talking to somebody who doesn't have sisters, you know, and I'm trying to explain, well, you see what happens to them. You know, you see them getting abused and treated like shit and, you know, all this kind of crap. And so you gain appreciation, and, you know, they have the periods and all this crap and the bullshit they go through and blah, blah, blah. And so you gain appreciation. And so now I didn't have to learn it. It was, the knowledge was imposed on me. And now I'm in the position of trying to explain to somebody who can't experience it. You know, they don't get to experience it. I have to describe it to them.
Right.
And that's the hard part, because I can't put them on the desert island for 5 years. I can't give them the experiences that gave me the knowledge. Instead, I have to somehow impart just the knowledge without the experience. And that's a tricky, it's a tough assignment to explain something that you know through personal contact. I know from touch, you know, it's like explaining it to an AI. It's like explaining your feelings to an artificial intelligence. And it's going to have no, it's going to be, what do you mean you feel it? What do you mean you know, what do you mean? What's this warm thing? What are you talking about? What's, you know, it's not going to be able to understand the signposts. And so it's such a difficult challenge to orient somebody to the position you have when you don't have any rope to tie to any standard poles.
What? Okay, interesting way to put that. Because for example, in college, right? There was a guy, and he had a sister, a single sister, and his dad was a truck driver, and his mom was somebody that he met in the war from Germany, and brought her over, and they had kids. And I went to college with this guy, and I remember we got in an argument way back even before the internet was fleshing out, like women that were, you know, young women or women that molested young men, and I remember, because I was sitting there as you were saying that, like what, you know, like the polls, because I was thinking, like, you know, it was interesting because we'd always have female babysitters. I think there might have been one time we had a male babysitter, but two of these babysitters, you know, were, you know, basically molesting. I thought, you know, and they were just weird, but it was weird to discussion in college with this guy.
Well, I think that's a whole subject that's probably made for a different conversation, because I have my doubts that you can draw parallels between the act of sex for a man and the act of sex for a woman, and what capacity they have to be abusive in the sense of rapey. Okay, I don't think a woman can actually rape a man, but whatever.
Well, number one, I was 6, hardly a man, right? And anyway,
well, I just mean that your sexual is so overt. It's so overt in the sense that your excitement is your excitement. It's not a deniable fact. Okay, so I just mean it can't be an unpleasurable act by the very fact that you are aroused by it.
I know.
So that would be my objection, that if you could argue that there was real triggers on a woman as overt as an erect penis, that
Look, I'm defending something I'm not even trying to get to, right? I'm painting a picture to fundamentally get to the idea of what it was to have an experience in my life that had some sort of echo that's very difficult to explain to a guy, the same guy with his sister, who was never molested by women, because he immediately, not unlike yourself, tried to chop away the idea and justify that this vein of relevance or significance within
no,
the
I'm just saying that I have counter-personal experience. So in the sense that I was molested, I was molested by some women, and I really enjoyed it. So I can't say it was a bad thing, right? I can't make the argument that I was raped by their molestation. Okay, so it's not the same kind of abusive act, I would argue, when perpetrated by these different sexes for different purposes. So that's all I'd argue.
No, meaning I'm not trying to lay blame. I'm not even trying to put women as culprit or them as predators or anything of this. That my point was the difficulty of, like you saying, growing up with sisters and having periods and explaining that to someone who didn't. And I'm sitting there saying, well, okay, so not only did I not have sisters, but I had these like girls doing shit to me before, the idea of even the idea of what it was like, it meaning the concept.
Well, I understand that point in the sense that you can certainly understand that it's even when it's not malicious by a girl, they play casually with your feelings even. Lots of ways that you can find where you could gain some resentment for their power and control over you. The very fact that you lust after them can be something you could resent. So I can understand how you can gain some negative perspective about how women are manipulating you. And I certainly see that as a reality. I mean, you're certainly manipulated by the fact that you are attracted to their charms, and that control they have isn't their fault, but it is nonetheless control. I mean, they're the ones who have the control, and that's what you feel is the bit in your teeth. You feel them tugging you and pulling you and, hurting you in this trivial way, for this buggy ride. And, that I can understand why the horse would resent the, what's being done to it. Even though it wasn't the woman that put the bit in your mouth.
Thanks for your exposition on this, but my point was simply to, like, if I'm not talking about someone's region or province, you speak of Louisiana, you're now in New Jersey, your age is different, your location, your perspective, the landscape, the history, the dimensionality, the relationships between brothers and sisters and parents and environment. Like every single individual comes up in we all have gravity to the ground unless someone's being raised in a space station. You know what I mean? It's like, but there's still this huge difference. And I guess what I was trying to point to, what by bringing that up, was the idea of what it means to have an expression that runs roughshod against somebody else's life's beliefs and construct of what the way they see things put together, right? So when I mentioned the guy in college, like he had this very commanding notion in laying down stats with women and this and that and so forth, when I wasn't really competing against it, but that just my mere approach to women in relationships, it really ran him, it changed both of us in trying to.
Well, I know, but that isn't that what I was trying to get to, is the fact that you can gain knowledge through two different things, through personal subjective experiences and through objective statistics or somebody happening to somebody else. You see it happen to somebody else a lot different than you happening to see it to you. So lots of different ways to gain knowledge or information. And I was just, in a sense, justifying that the personal way is a very loud way versus the intellectual way. So actually, living the book versus reading the book, you're very different. And that's what you're competing against and competing with, is the difference in those two medias of movie versus book, in terms of, the trigger and grokking capacity, to get somebody to grok the idea. The two mediums have different advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, well, certainly. And then how one reapproaches and deals with their own personal experience versus the intellectual, the information of other people's experiences. Yeah, it's certainly taken in differently, and it's dealt with in its
yeah. Well, you might have to write a whole book to explain, one bad experience you have in one day. You know what I mean? I mean, you might need a book of knowledge to equal that value of that one day of horror or something, in terms of how much you gained or learned versus what you would have to have consumed if you didn't consume it in feelings. If you had to consume it in knowledge alone, it might have taken many thousands of pages, and many thousands of images and metaphors to get to your nuts as quickly as the real life experience does. It gets right to your nuts and shoves them right, into your chest cavity, and and it's a lot harder to shove somebody's nuts into their throat with a bunch of fucking words on paper.
Exactly. Like who the fuck, who the fuck are you to tell me about me, right? Just that forever. Who the fuck are you to tell me about you, right? It's like I don't have time for it. It's a displacement, or there's no way you're going to be able to impart your whole history of experience and knowledge. I'm just going to have to figure you out. And that's why, even our time duration over the expanse takes on a different significance than just somebody off the boat that interacts with us. And so it is that idea of figuring out where someone is coming from and how it is they graduated to what it is they think, how it is they approach things. I keep falling into differences and then trying to find commonalities with this notion that no matter how much I nod my head in agreement and try to get to this idea of a consensus truth with somebody, there's always going to be something that comes about that says, "No, I'm just not there. I'm not on the same page."
Yeah, well, part of the problem, though, I think, is that if we went back to the elephant metaphor, you don't think the elephant's an elephant. You think it is a shapeshifter. The elephant can be these different things, that it has any shape that is purposeful or individually productive, or some other definition of what you say the truth can be, or the truth can morph into, where I'm saying the truth is really explicit. It's a hard, it's not like a photon, and it's, it doesn't know where it is, and it's Heisenberging, and it's escaping our realization. Every time we get to see it a little bit better, it starts to jump away. It's some jumping bean or something. I'm saying the truth is not a jumping bean. It's not vibrating incessantly. It's really pretty solid. And that's my grounding, where I'm saying the real challenge here is we getting into we finding posts, angles that we agree on, finding just even one position where we can say, yes, we're both seeing the same thing here. Now let's take one step to the left and see if we see the same thing. And then we'll take one step to the left and see if we see the same thing. That's my challenge. Just try to inch ourselves away around this elephant so I can convince you, yes, it's an elephant. I'm really sure.
I did do that at one point. I just, like it was a grounding, like, hey, let's do it here. Think of it this, look at it this way. And it was this reiteration of, this is the bedrock, this is the ground. But then I started to then think, like, I am a pelican and you're a fox now, meaning that you're always on the ground, and I keep jumping on. Like, to me, I'm well, let me hop up here, and you're busy going left to right. And I thought, just that like the freedom of a different axis of movement had me like, well, I can't like I can see where you're at when you're there. Like I can grant that over when I'm there. But the whole idea that, you know, 5 blind guys feeling an elephant, the idea, the phrase feeling an elephant is the objective pointing to saying that is what it is that they're doing. And meaning the idea that that there is somebody that can say that is in fact what this is, and the rest of you are just feeling your way around it.
Well, I'm just saying that's something that has to be sort of conceded as the theme of the metaphor, is that they're actually trying to describe what they feel. So I'm just saying they're not talking about the experience of feeling an elephant. You know, they're talking about the fact of the the problem of dual purpose, of dual perspective, of different perspective, and the fact that that is the liability, is that one guy is at the back of the elephant, one guy is in a different position looking at the elephant from the front. And it's the difference in the positions that's the quandary of the human condition. We both are in a different condition, which means a different position when we're looking at reality. So our different condition translates with a clear equal sign into a different position in terms of perspective. So we're looking at reality from a different point of view, and there's nothing we can do about that. And the only way we can get around it is to try to, you know, establish some sort of post where, yes, we can see from these positions, we have the same position. We have a similar eyes view. And that's the best we can do, is try to find those grounded points and then move, you know, step by step, and hope we're moving in the same direction, because we are blind, right? We can't feel each other. We can't touch each other. And so we can't tell if your left is my right. We don't even know if we agree on which direction we're moving.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where I was, you know, and at some point I made a purposeful move that even if I was on the same page, knowing that your mode was, okay, let's pragmatically step right and look, that they're like, hey, I'm just not going to move that way. Meaning it was like, I'm just not going to let you further the argument on tactic that I was, you know, bringing up to stalwart to block your, you know, meaning in terms of just argumentative sake, how do I win an argument? It was a tactic, a technique to not move when I knew that was what you were trying to do, was move it in this way. And then every single micro movement, it was always like, well, okay, now let's argue a definition here, and let's argue a perspective here, and let's argue a history here, and let's argue an outline contextual narrative. And
yeah, well, it's very difficult to keep the personal shit out of it, and that's what I get a lot. You know, even in the physics arguments, there's all this psychobabble about my psychology or my anxiety disorder or something else, and you're saying, how is this possible that we, you know, this conversation has to be reduced to this babble, you know, when we're doing something about some explicit absolute truth statements you're making about the universe, and we're going to have to argue each other's psychology for why you can't see it right because your psychology is broken or some other bullshit. It's like, who wants to bother with that rubbish, you know, in terms of but some of it you have to do because it does have a real effect. I mean, psychology is unfortunately a player in whether somebody is going to be a defender of a sports hero or not, right? If I have contempt for the sport, then I can't possibly see the heroes of the sport as heroes, right? If I think the sport is crap, I can't iconize them. I can't cherish them. I can't say what a great performance when I think it's ugly as fuck and stupid and a waste of time. And, you know.
But an iconoclast and a hero, for me, yeah, Paul Bunyan as a mythic narrator. I don't like trees being cut down, but here he is, Paul Bunyan, and Babe the, like, it's not a hero, it's not a sport to cut it down, but that's his occupation. And yet, nevertheless, he's larger than life in my mind. You know, I mean,
well, and who couldn't like Blue, right? I mean, fuck, you know, it's just, I felt so bad in the end. It's like, oh, you know, it's Blue off into the sunset, you know. But yeah, I mean, you know, all these stories and metaphors, like, again, that, you know, it's so many things. Like I said, you broaden the context, and it suffers in the sense that I just think so much of what we live in the moment, and the now, and that just knocks a big hunk out of our intelligence off, because we're just too caught up in the, oh, let's not worry about when we're 80, the wheelchair, and we think it's a good day because we didn't poo our pants. Let's not go there.
Well, and I was wondering, because I was just turning someone on and said, oh, well, there's this, it's like the Google Hangouts or the great debate community, and they argue in text, and then they get together in Hangouts. And I thought, you have a persona to also keep up, but I also thought, you're capable of pulling your reins back, but it's not like you to do so in engagement. And I just thought, what do you look like in, because you've had plenty of tiny chats and pools and like mob style. Like I remember like dealing with mob style arguments in philosophy rooms, trying to defend positions and work, like an Aikido master to line these two up and knock them down and go over here. And I thought you would go in and bark, defend, and then you'd be shut out or pushed out, and I just thought, I wonder.
Well, you're trolled out. You're trolled out, right? Because that's really when I lose. That's my triggers, the trolls. They trigger me by changing the subject, converting it, bending it in all kinds of stupid places. So if you can really have a disciplined conversation where somebody knows they're not allowed to start saying something stupid like, you're fucked up because your mother didn't wipe your anus with mineral oil often enough, or some kind of bullshit. You're like, oh, no, that's not the subject, retard. And that's when I lose it. It's when when I'm debased into this kindergarten conversation, and I'm like, well, I'm not doing. I already did kindergarten. I'm not doing ABC blocks again. Fuck you. No.
And I think to me, once again, if I think of everybody as different and approaching things differently, then you are going to get a kindergartner, a dumbed down, and you're really hyper intellectual, and you're going to get corralling and all sorts of different personality. Meaning, I'm always expecting some new novel thing, even if it's really not novel to me, something that has that. And I just didn't know whether or not you ever felt like you could, as if you were in a wheelchair, infirm, like, I'm Gary, and I'm just in the room, and you're listening, and I really hate this, but I'm not going to yell, and almost this idea of what would it be like if Gary did swim amongst these groups of differing people that.
Well, I'm pretty chameleon, I go where I can play different roles as a person, so it's not like I said, it just triggers. I still say it, it's that simple. I'm triggered into things. I don't go there because that's what I want to do. I don't get upset and argue and yell because I enjoy it. I do it because I'm incredibly frustrated and irritated and sick and tired. So I'm like some guy in some fucking foxhole, and my boots is rotten, and I stink and I can't stand it, and these assholes are like flies, taking little bites of skin, and I'm like, Well,
meaning I know that you don't go swimming in those groups, that you prefer your mode, and I didn't.
No, that's not true. I would accept a group if the group actually could have a constructive conversation, but first, I don't think groups can do that. Okay, group conversations always go lowest common denominator. They're always dominated by the squeaky wheel ABC guy, and he controls the agenda, and so you never get to any higher concepts because you're always kept dragged back to Walmart. So go back to Walmart, back to Walmart, back to Walmart. And it's just like, no.
The denominator is the bottom of your stomach, and you want to approach it where the acid is in the stomach. Like, hey, I'm here. Here's my acid level. I'm laying it down, and they're like, hey, wait, there's the bottom of the stomach, the lowest. Whether or not you're like, okay, I'm going to exhale, let my duodenum like lower the stomach, and then I'm approach it, like accept it, and then raise them up into the ass.
Well, I'm just saying that's the game, though. The game is levels. You know, it's like any video game or anything else. It's levels, and you can't go back and then go forward. You know, to the end. You have to do it in the rows of these levels, and so once you're thrown back a level, you're stuck having to regain all the ground you had before in terms of context in the conversation. So you have to go back to get the context where it's supposed to be, and it takes just as much effort. And so redundant. I mean, the human race has been arguing some conversations for hundreds of years, and they haven't advanced the conversation because they always go back to the starting line. You know, there's no God because, and you know, blah 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 blah, and you have to re-argue the same crap over and over and explain how, well, you know, who created God, and you know, what was God doing forever if God was forever? What did he do forever? And then he came up with the idea of making humans and tormenting them. I mean, that's not the kind of idea you take forever to think of. That's the kind of idea you have when you're not thinking very well and you might be a little drunk. I mean,
what? No, and but I mean, like they're like, if you controlled who, like, oh, I belong to a community, but I'm opening a room, and these are the players that you've witnessed, like, oh, atheist, and I might bring in one.
Well, if you have some suggestions of people that I can have a fruitful, intelligent conversation with, I'm all for it. I just haven't found anybody, well, frankly.
I think there's some stuff, because I thought, guy, you would be added here, but then I also, like, there's certain, like, I was criticizing, like, the Facebook, you have to have certain sort of, even in the modern airs, often in social media, you have to have a boardroom personality of civil compliance that I think it needs to be broached and waived, and people do break it, but there is kind of this demand of, hey, this is the way we're doing business. This is the way.
Yeah. Well, look, I haven't said skanky cunt too many times in this conversation, so yeah, I can tone it down. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't feeling an obligation to in this conversation, so it's not like I have some impulse that says I got to swear a lot and I got to be, I got to ridicule people right to the, groin and all that stuff. I mean, some of that I do tend to do, but I just mean that if I know, we're at the fancy restaurant, and you don't belch and fart and take your shoes off and shit. Yeah, I know that part. Okay, I can figure it out.
Right. Well, and I thought if you waded into some of the room, and by wade, you know what I mean, like you're walking gently, carrying a big stick or something, that, and going in slowly, and not allowing your temperament to increase quickly a stigma and reputation within the community. Then I think, meaning if there was a sense of self-reserve of expression, even when you're triggered right out of the gate, to just allow it just to take the temperature of the water, so to speak.
Well, I've done that, though. I've done that. I just don't, like I said, I wish you could do that and be passive and the conversation would be enriched. But as soon as I tone it down, you take the advantage of talking about, would you like silverware or gold silverware? And I'm like, is this what you're going to talk about? I don't want to do this. I mean, I really don't want. I don't want to talk about gold versus silverware. Well, please.
At one point, I was like, I had this idea, like, I'm going to line up Stefan Molyneux to argue with Gary about public policy or something, because, and I remember, like, I had that idea, like, I was just going to put it out there, and then and it was more like not pitting people, but more like allowing people to enter the hot tub. And you're right, it's dumbed down, but I'm just saying, like, I know that I know a place where you can put down your weapon and still engage with other people. And
look, I had a couple of conversations with Stefan Molyneux. There was a couple of video conversations we did. So
really?
Yeah. So they're on my YouTube. And there were civil conversations, and we respected each other, and we just totally disagreed, So, because we knew that was the format, you know what I'm saying? We didn't, there's nothing, professionals know not to get personal and do all that kind of raggy shit. So, you just argue about, your premises, and I think I wiped the floor with him. I think I made a nonsense out of his rubbish.
Well, was that after I posted that video where I'm like, where I said?
Probably it was before. It was a good 5 years ago at least. So.
Well. Oh, okay. Well, that's interesting. I didn't know. I mean, I had some back and forth text exchange with him before he kind of his game got ramped up, but I didn't know that you had video interaction.
Yeah, he obviously wasn't as big as back then as he is now, but he was still substantial character in a sense. He had 30 or 40,000 subs and that kind of thing, so he wasn't a nobody. But I mean, I was the nobody in the conversation. But like I said, it was I had one with How the World Works too. I did a conversation with him back in the old days. Well, I'm just saying, I'm perfectly immutable to having fruitful arguments with people. I'm just saying the group thing. I got tired of it because it always went, like I said, always lowest common. The biggest troll in the room wins. So you always go where the biggest troll says you're going, and that's there's just no productivity to it.
I looked at because I knew the bar, but I was just looking at it in terms of population, like cluster population. Like I'm just part of a cluster, and there's going to be somebody that's a lower cluster, the lower bar and the higher bars, and then it's your idea to peel the cream off of the top, and then the next time you enter a room, only invite the cream that makes sense, and then re-slather it and see who else shows up in the next blotter or the next.
Yeah, no, I still have hope for the internet being able to do this. I think this conversation was constructive, and I think it's the way to try to migrate it into individuals exchanging. Like we trade off who argues, and then try to find even a format for it, a way of judging who should go to the next person first, whether I should take on the person first or you take on the person first, and that kind of some method to the madness. Structure the conversation to try to get it to turn and whirl in some kind of positive direction. And I just in terms of not only expanding the subject matter to include all that you can, but to enhance the quality of the interaction between the individuals and what they're trying to accomplish and what they're trying to say, without getting into the hostility of, what do you mean you're for raping women? You fucking lunatic, you sadistic, masochistic, insane fuckhead. That's just, it's not what I want the argument to be, is an argument about how big an asshole me or you is. The argument is about what's the, how do we do this conversation thing in a productive way to get to what we both should respect, which is the truth.
Well, and the truth is that Quentin Tarantino did write about Like a Virgin, Madonna's Like a Virgin, is that woman was a fuck machine, and then finally she met a John Holmes fucker that really laid the big stick on her, and so it hurt, and the pain made her like a virgin, and that's what the song was. Sorry, I'm just remembering.
Yeah, well, that was a bit of a non sequitur, I might call it.
Right.
Yeah. Maybe.
I bring that up kind of part because, like you said, like almost as if this was some sort of spin-off into other interactions and a culmination of good interaction. But still, nonetheless, my theme of the interaction had to do almost with, like, if we're up here talking, then it had to do with the idea of the effect upon. Like I have this wish that the listener would find within our discussion their place as like a third nodule or an intersection between us, as if you're working now not with just a Venn diagram with three sections where they find themselves interacting and they find a portion of themselves independent, so that they're not slave to responding. Like
well, as you pointed out, though, the burdens of life, and I don't think you can be both a nurse and a doctor. You know what I mean? I mean, you can't do the caring for the patient and then doing the thinking about the patient's interest, and the two are in conflict with each other in some respects. Some respects you don't even want to see the cake you're making because it'll deter you from making it. Because it's like some paintings, right? They start off so wrong. It's like, where am I going with this? And what a disaster. And so if you think too much, you're not going to be able to do what you need to do in terms of releasing, what I'm saying, getting to the level you want to be, the freedom you want to have in terms of getting it done. So you kind of know those liabilities. So I'm not I'd like to be more personal with people. I don't have the real estate. I'm just saying I don't have the personal capacity to care for more people because it taxes me. It drains me. Like, it hurts when somebody tells me about their horrible life and what's happened to them and all that stuff. And I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying, okay, yeah, please let me know. All right. But I can't do that. I can't wallow in that every day. Or I'm dead. So I can't, I'm sorry if I've said something that has created more torment or trouble in a mind. I don't mean to trouble you, but in a sense, I'll go back to the, what the fuck's this Clarence Darrow line, I'm here to, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable, and I can't help that if you've put yourself in the wrong category, okay, because, it's not my agenda. I didn't try to do that, but I have to do my job.
Right, and regardless of the effect, and like, hey, fucking deal with it, right? And at the same time, they're maturing through it. I think, and maybe I got overly concerned because there was this triplet of rush of, one slice and dicing, one narrative anxiety, the other one running into trees and obscuring and feeling like kind of a barren.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying your own example is one that still bothers me. So I'm just saying, I just have to use the Dospook example and say you fucking jumped off a building for fucking Christ's sakes. I mean, I'm not saying I caused it solely. It was a thing I did, but I'm just saying it was something for which I was part of the breeze, right? I was one of the butterflies flapping. And so it's not that I haven't been, that it hasn't been rubbed in my nose. Okay, that there's a price to pay for the
Well,
you can't got to break some eggs to make an omelet. You got to kill some civilians to blow up the enemy. All this collateral damage is somehow acceptable. I'm not saying it's acceptable. I just don't know how to do it without making any of it.
I'm hearing you. Well, and perfect tie-in back to me. Way to make it all about me, Gary. I appreciate
it. Yeah, well, it's in a sense it is, right? So
North Star, and you just and then when you are it's like, yeah, you're well said, and and it is weird to speak about one's role into another, and then one's accepting one's like, hey, I'm gonna the choice or the direction of allowing oneself to choose to do something so obscure as this, as jumping off a roof or whatnot, and to have it painted with, like, one guy, I mean, put it this way, you were more present as Butterfly Effect, but this other guy, he totally thought because he bought a painting off of me that I once said I would never sell, that and then I jump off a building. He assumed that he was directly responsible as a disjuncture in, like, of me losing my ground to rationale because I broke my own promise to not sell a painting. Like, he took my jump super personally, and it was so weird. I mean, it's weird to assume how, and here I am taking these other people's, embedding, like, oh, there's anxiety and there's confidence, or there's harm, self-harm and masochisms, and taking on, like, God, how am I not a role? Like, I'm over embellishing my role. Like, hey, I'm a bigger butterfly in that than I wanted to be, and you are too, obviously, because.
Yeah, maybe it's I'm just being a
But
coward, and I just want to be a lab technician. You know, I you know, I just want to stay in my lab and do my chemistry, and I can't do the watching of the chemistry injected, and I can't, you know, I can't. I don't have the stomach for the reality of what's going on in people's lives and the real pain that they have, and I have no cure for it. I guess if I had the magic, you know, if I had some kind of, it's like I have a certain talent when it comes to mechanical devices, you know, where I could just lay my hands on them. I would go to people's houses, they have a broken appliance, and I would literally just lay my hands on it, you know, jiggle the thing a little, and hey, it's fixed, you know. And that's, you know, these are real stories, you know, it really happened, you know. I was like Fonzie, you know what I mean? I could just walk into the room, you know, and fix it. And
your town, we'd have to move their town into your.
yeah, now if I could do that with people, I mean, if it was that easy that all I had to do was say I love you and give you a hug or something, okay, I would do it. But you know, I don't think that's going to be the solution. And you know, you know, if you think I'm scary when you had a little bit of me, the more of you get, the more of me you get. You know, it's not going to make you feel better. I don't got any good stories. All I got is shitty stories.
I think under the hard exterior, you got a gooey gum line that, you know, that, and then you've got blood under that. But you know, it's not my job to clean your teeth in that metaphor either. I'm just saying, like, and maybe you're just, you know, hey, I'm just going to keep laying it on thick, and then you're going to be off.
Well, it's the way I am. That's the way I function. That's the way I see it. So I'm just saying that's the way it is. But I just mean, yeah, the personal side, I would argue that I've become, you know, I was always a bit of an introvert, and I'm still not.
Not an introvert.
Yeah, you know, I just, you know, connected. I mean, you know, I'm still a sucker for pussy. Don't get me wrong, but I just mean I just don't. It's really hard for me to just, you know, get involved with people because it's, you know, it hurts me. And because most of the people, like I said, who come to me are crippled. They're, you know, it's like at the Jesus syndrome, right? They all those people showing up are the guys with the plague, right? You know, and it's like, oh man, you know, I got some beans, you know, you want some beans? I mean, maybe that'll help. But yeah, I got no cure.
I feel more bold and broadened through my suffering in time, and I don't feel like you can toss, you know, an enfilade, a volley of fire my way, and I think, like, you know, like it'd be hard to feel damaged at this stage, like, because I think meaning I feel better over all of what I've done, you know, like the hell to heaven thing is like there's
yeah, I wish the road wasn't quite as rocky. That's all. I mean, my only argument would be I wish you were sliding down snow, you know, rather than crashing into rocks. So if I have to be a witness to, you know, the Enlightenment, you know, I just wish it wasn't through this brutal stoning, you know. yeah, it's really nice.
You know, like, I don't know, you know, it opened up like my connection with people in wheelchairs and on canes and infirm. Like it expanded my level of empathy out, and because it made me more like a group that I wasn't like, and it was just more of seeing a dramatic difference happen instead of a graduated intellectual growth. But I don't want to go on about like, oh, hey, this is really positive, but there is, it's almost that whole, world is giving you exactly what it is you are at all times kind of.
Yeah, well, there's a part of me that just doesn't, you know, like I said, we sort of have our problems about the whole masochist element to it and the glorification of, you know, this is almost a Kantavad, you know, argument that it, you know, somehow what you pay for something doesn't matter, but it, you know, I still can't get past the fact that it's an awful high price for knowledge that should be accessible, there should be the easy checkout thing. You shouldn't really have to go do it the hard way. There should be an easy way to get the job done. You don't like turn the car over upside down to take the tires off, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and it just happens to be my style. Well, anyway, I should probably close down. I got to figure out my bedtime.
Yeah, no, I understand. And we only have so much gas in the bag. But anyway, it was nice. It's nice seeing you again. In spite of the times when you really pissed me off, I never didn't care for Dospook. I was always worried about you.
Yeah, no, it come up in conversation, consideration. Someday, unlike the effects of Firo, maybe I have to hang out with you on the outside of your house. At a 20-foot distance. Hey, look, I'm passing through to New York.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's if I wasn't a neurotic, it wouldn't be a big deal. But yeah, that's the only challenge to meeting people. But I had a couple of people here this weekend. They stopped by just randomly and visited the Inmendham ball of string, and so it was interesting.
Wow.
So it's not like I'm opposed. But yeah, like I said, it's just a matter of my own neuroses. I'm just so much more comfortable if there's no living things in my environment. I love isolation. I do so well in a nice padded room.
Take this mosquito truck into my house. Spraying out that die a little before you come in, and then you can. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting because who knows. Because I refer to the rat's nest of Inmendham's rat's nest.
There's no place like home. It's just like I said, it saved my life. I wouldn't have survived if I didn't find this hovel.
Yeah.
It's enough isolation. I needed to get away, and this wasn't going to Arkansas or something. You know what I mean? It's not out of civilization, but it's detached enough from neighbors and things that made me crazy that I have enough distance, and so it creates enough security for me psychologically. Because I really am quite neurotic about the whole human phobic thing. I mean, I'm quite uncomfortable in civilization.
Yeah. Well, that's why we got to get you out into it. I'll be out there in a month.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Everybody has their own. Well, couldn't we just put you in the trunk and drive you? No, couldn't you just? No, you just don't get it.
Come on, we're going to duck tie him and put his hair in ponytails.
Yeah, right. And the next day I'll just axe murder you all. But anyway.
You're in New York. At least he killed us in New York.
Yeah, so it'd be good therapy for them. But anyway, so
right.
Let's do it again sometime and all that crap. And it's good seeing you. And
for doing it, for hanging. And yeah, it is good. It is good to do this. Well, have a good one.
Likewise and such.
We'll see how our responses are to the video.
Yeah. Well, who could dislike this video? I mean, we were both pretty charming. So
yeah.
I think we got this one sewed up. I don't think anybody could complain.
Yeah.
No. Okay. Till next time.